Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the NXTGEN Racing GT3 Championship as brought to you on the sim racing platform on PC known as iRacing. We are here today for round number 10 of the 12 round calendar, and we are at the Canadian circuit in Montreal. It is the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve for what is expected to be a very tight and tense round of racing. As we can see on our schedule there, we have got the standard format of the sprint race followed by the feature race, but all before the racing, we of course do have our qualifying session. So to take you through that schedule, the times in British Summer Time or UTC +1, at 8 o'clock this evening, British Summer Time, it's qualifying for 15 minutes to determine our grid order for race number 1. That is the sprint race, which will kick off immediately after. And that is a 15-minute race, no strategy involved. It's go, go, go from start to finish to determine who is going to pick up the greatest number of points in that race. And also that race will determine our grid order for the feature race, which follows it, of course, having the reverse grid based on the finishing results of the sprint race. Between the sprint and the feature race, we will have a brief break where we'll be giving our drivers a breather, and also on top of that, taking interviews with our winners in both of the categories, in the pro and the amateur categories of the sprint race. And then at 5 to 9, we'll be back and getting ready for the feature race, the 1 hour race with the all-important strategic element. Again, equal points up for grabs as with the sprint race, and our drivers will be looking to try and get good finishes in both races, of course. Now, I should point out that this series is not just brought to you by NXTGEN Racing, but it's also brought to you in collaboration with Apex Racing Academy and also Next Level Racing, our senior partners who work with us to bring this series without whom it would not be possible, and we'll introduce them very shortly. But as for who you have in your commentary box tonight, you have myself, Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britna Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all the racing action tonight at the Canadian circuit. But without further ado, let us introduce our sponsors, starting off with Apex Racing Academy. So who are Apex Racing Academy? Well, they're not just a setup shop. They are dedicated to making you better at iRacing with services, access to drivers and features not found on other driving schools and academies. Working with them will see you connecting with pros like never before. You can learn how to prepare for a race, build setups, improve lap times and understand how to use telemetry tools such as VRS. Every week we host multiple sessions, they host multiple sessions I should say, where members can join the coaches and take advantage of group coaching sessions. And in partnership with SDK Gaming, all the data provided will be automatically synced directly to your PC. There's no need to go hunting for setup, replay or ghost files, the data is right there when you turn the simulator on. Interested? Well then why not sign up today at apexracingac.com. That's apexracingac.com. Now, of course, we go from one partner to another, and that is Next Level Racing. Now, who are Next Level Racing? Well, founded in 2009, Next Level Racing is the world's leading simulation brand, revolutionising simulation with its industry-leading product range. With clear focus on innovation and quality to meet the demanding needs of sim racers, Next Level Racing's designs and technology shall take your sim racing experience to the next level. If you want to know more about their products, be sure to head to their official website, that is nextlevelracing.com, today for further information. That's nextlevelracing.com. Now, of course, as I said previously, without both Apex Racing Academy and Next Level Racing, it would not be possible for us to bring you this series. And to clarify, a good number, if not all of the prizes for this series have been provided to us by Next Level Racing in tandem with Apex Racing Academy. So we're very grateful to have them on board, and indeed, all in it together means that we can bring you this wonderful series. Now, as we go from talking about our primary sponsors to our standings, it has been a championship which has ebbed and flowed in both classes. And we start off, of course, with what is our class in the pro category, and as we can see here, it is a case that Billy Fletcher is still leading the pro championship with 500 points to his name after what was a good result at Brands Hatch last time around in round number 9. I should clarify, it says round 8 up there, but it's definitely around number 9 last time out. We're at round 10 today, but it wasn't to work out as well for Fletcher as it was for his teammate from Luxem 24, and that was Matt Carano, who had a dominant display at Brands Hatch, picking up the pole position, the fastest lap in the feature race. He didn't quite get the perfect result with missing out on the fastest lap in the sprint race, which went to Fletcher, but he did pick up the wins in both the sprint race and the feature race in the pro category, meaning that Caruana now stands on 475 points. He has jumped clear of Harry Melvin in P3 and is now only 25 points away in hunting down Billy Fletcher, his teammate, and these two titans will be going to battle today. We can be sure of that in the hunt for the championship win. Outside the top two, Harry Melvin still leading the chase there in P3 with 391 points, having a dismal sprint race, but indeed turning things around in the feature race, and unfortunately missing out on the win in the end, with Caruana making the move around the outside of Melvin at Hawthorns late on in the race at Brands Hatch. But a brilliant showdown between the two of them, and it wasn't to be for Melvin, but Melvin continuing to prove that outside the top two, he really has been the best of the rest in the pro class. Outside the top three, Kenny Heremans holding on to 275 points now in that P4 position, picking up another 27 points there with a good pair of results in the midfield of the pro class at Brands Hatch. And we can see Oystein Hereford there as well, continuing the chase to finish in P4 against Heremans, picking up a further 18 points to his name at Brands Hatch. 230 points is tally now, and then we do have that separation from P6 down to P10, with Paul King leading the next pack there, only 4 points clear of Jean-Louis Deschamps. Deschamps having a brilliant result in the sprint, but it did not work out in the feature, and Jakob Boshoff dropping down the order, and once again we will not be seeing Boshoff at the circuit today due to personal circumstances, but we look forward to his potential return in what will be around number 11. Bobby Thompson not able to take part last time around either at Brands Hatch, dropping down the order after what was a fantastic display with his commencement into the series as a Silverstone, and it is the case that we've had the absence of Thompson for a couple of rounds now, so we'll be hoping that he does return in the near future. We'd love to see him back in the fight, and Ben Hicks there completing our top 10 in the pro category on 137 points. Looking outside of the top 10, we can see it is the continued chase of Jeremy Debova in that P11 position. However, Debova now has the hunt of Ed Lack coming after him. Ed Lack picking up 26 points at Brands Hatch, now putting him on 120 points, only 4 off Debova, and you can imagine that these two would love to be the primary contender to try and get into the top 10 come the end of the championship. Andrew Lovesey, who will not be able to take part today in P13, only picking up 2 points at Brands Hatch, not to work out for the P13 driver, and he will be feeling his absence tonight, and the fact he will not be able to pick up points to continue that chase of Lack and Debova. But where he is absent, other drivers such as the Verlaming or Norman will be able to try and close the gap to Lovesey, and we can also see there Ben Faines in P19 picking up 21 points on his debut at Brands Hatch, putting in a good result, and we'll be expecting more from him tonight. Now, looking outside of our top 20 to our remaining drivers there, a good number of them being debutants last time out at Brands Hatch. We can see Pimbo there picking up 12 points on his debut at Brands Hatch, and the same for Tony Verschaff picking up 10 points there, Dasunik 4 points. Ben Henderson only having 3 points to his name, and that was from earlier on in the season, not able to pick up any more points last time around. And Deegan Fairclough able to pick up 2 points in the sprint race, getting his first 2 points on the board. As we look over to the AM standings, we can see here our amateur class drivers. It is the case that in the championship fight at the moment, particularly in the top 10, we have got a closer field in terms of the top 10 as a whole here. With George Bland currently our runaway championship leader, or what we would think would be our runaway championship leader, but Bland has had this oscillation with regards to he's been breaking away and then been reeled back in. But he's now back in control of that championship lead on 423 points after the win in the sprint race and picking up 5 points in the feature race after a very difficult feature race, which was full of incidents at Brands Hatch, and Bland found himself right in the heat of one of those incidents, which saw him losing out on the opportunity to gain a significant number of points. And Ollie Wade picking up a good point score, 50 points there, in the end going to 391 on his tally and giving himself a gap to Alexander Batak. The Dane looking to hunt down Wade, and will be trying to do so now with the gap between the two of them accumulating to 25 points. You can imagine Alexander Batak would love to go on the offensive versus Wade to try and be the primary challenger to Bland should Bland drop any points from this point forward. Outside our top 3, Mikkel Andreasen, another Danishman from Denmark, doing a fantastic job there to hold on to P4 for the time being after a good result of Brands Hatch, giving him a slight advantage over the pursuing Nigel Stock. The gap between the two of them now up to 15 points, but you can imagine that between Stock and Andreasen it will be the case that the two of them will come to blows once again in terms of those point saves. Perhaps we'll even see them battle out on circuit tonight. Outside the top 5, Van Hernacker and Matthew Addy very close as well, 3 points separating the two of them, and really our top 7 then form a boundary to the remainder of the top 10. With Jochen leading the charge for P8 and the chase of P7 there. He's got a sizable gap to close down to Matthew Addy, but if anybody can do it, the German in the Jägermeister machine, that BMW M4 that we love to see, can potentially do it. And Matthew Emmons on 143 points, and I should point out that Matthew Emmons will be changing car as of tonight to the Lamborghini Huracan, which means that he will be dropping points. and therefore we can expect that Matthew Emmons' campaign to finish in the top 5 will be taking a significant knock and may be at its conclusion, but we will wait and see. Outside of the top 10 in the amateur class, Navarro de Bova still holding on to that P11 position, losing out to a degree in the chase of the top 10 with a difficult day at Brands Hatch last time out, only picking up 12 points, and you can see that as a result of that, the field behind him have been able to accumulate some points, whereas de Bova has not been able to pick up as many as he would like. Jürgen Ockert there in P12 also having a difficult time at Brands Hatch, but the name in particular that we should keep an eye out for is Stefan Gamberg Rasmussen, picking up a further 40 points, particularly with pole position in the amateur class, and now up to 54 points. You can imagine with a couple more solid results, if he's able to achieve them, he's going to be trying to nip at the heels of the top 10, or at least Navarro de Bova's P11 come the end of the championship. We've also got there Tom Porter down in P19 with 34 points, and not able to race tonight, unfortunately, Tom Porter, so he'll not be able to start to begin his pursuit back to the top 15, and Tom Delaney there on 33 points. He'll be looking to get a couple of points on the board today to try and get ahead of Porter. Outside our top 20, we can see Jack Wyborn, Gareth Mills, Chris Kennan, and also Aaron Thompson there, all trying to find some points on the board. Chris Kennan been able to get 2 points to add to his tally at Brands Hatch in the sprint race, but all these drivers are looking for a solid points finish today. Although I do believe Gareth Mills, our P22 driver in the championship, will not be taking part today due to illness, and as a result, we wish him well and hope that he is back in a week's time. But now, coming away from our standings, let's talk about the track. So, the Montreal Circuit in Quebec, Canada, known as Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, named after the famous motorsport driver, of course, consisting of 14 corners. Now, we're going to be referring to the corners by their numerical names. However, there's one particular corner, or one particular feature on a corner that many of you will be aware of, and that is known as the Wall of Champions. The exit wall on the final corner, the chicane of turns 13 and 14, but particularly the exit wall at turn 14, known for the fact that it has seen the crashing of multiple championship leading cars, or particularly championship leading drivers, into that wall, and that's why it's referred to as the Wall of Champions, because it will claim the driver before they become a champion. Now, this circuit is a very tight circuit, particularly in the run from turn 1 all the way round to turn 10. It is a very difficult circuit to overtake in the first 2/3, and it is in the run out the turn 10 hairpin all the way down to turn 13, the start of the final chicane, down what is known as the Casino Straight, where we're expecting the major overtakes to take place, a big slipstream zone there. So it's going to be one for our drivers, much like Brands Hatch last week, where overtaking is at a premium and moves have to be forced through, or you've got to have a major advantage in the first instance. Plus, on top of that, qualifying is critical. Now, of course, that's for the sprint race in particular. You can imagine in the 15 minutes allotted for the sprint race, qualifying is going to be such an important factor. And in the feature race, you can imagine that the strategy is going to play a major part. And here is a reference lap as provided by one Edward Lack, one of our pro drivers. So as he makes his way then through the final chicane through turns 14 and 14, making sure not to scrape the Wall of Champions, he comes charging down towards turn 1. Coming all the way up into Virage de Senna, and as he comes into turn 1, then coming all the way down through the gearbox into second gear here, and then stamping on the anchors once again for turn number 2, going all the way down to first gear. And as soon as he can see the exit, he gets on the throttle and immediately charges out up into turns 3 and 4, the first of a number of chicanes at this circuit. At this first chicane, it is a low-speed chicane, but you've got the ability to attack it on exit as he makes his way out of turn 4 there. You can see Lack really pushing to the limits, and then through turn 5 he comes to sweeping right-hander at turn 5 before coming up into the moderate braking zone of turn number 6. Coming all the way down to second gear, you could argue this is a reverse chicane, a left into right rather than a right into left, as he makes his way out of 7 and now charges all the way down towards turns 8 and 9 once again. What we're going to see as he makes his way all the way down this curve straight towards turn number 8 is that he's going from 5th gear all the way down to second gear now, and another chicane here. This is the third chicane we have already seen at this circuit. This circuit is full of chicanes, more so than a circuit such as Monza. And as he now makes his way from turn 9 down towards turn 10, another major acceleration zone coming into the hairpin here, and it's all about positioning the car to get the best possible launch onto that final straight. As he makes his way through from first gear now, he's going to accelerate all the way out through the gears to top gear as he comes through turn 11, the small kink left-hander there, and now through the kink right-hander that takes him onto the Casino Straight here of turn number 12, as he makes his way through it and now charges all the way down there up to 6th gear. He's going to go very shortly and looking for his braking point to go in to the final chicane, the 4th chicane on the circuit, and this is where it's make or break. The World Champions looms on the right hand side. He clatters both the sausage curbs there and completes it very smoothly as he makes his way across the timeline there. Edward Lack with a very nice lap for our reference lap, and we're very grateful, of course. Now, our rules for tonight, all of our drivers will be required to run the iRacing high downforce setup, and in terms of the races themselves, sprint race, each driver has one fast repair available, and in the feature race, our drivers will have their fuel loads restricted to 75% for the start of the race. There is a mandatory pit stop as well, as we all know. which will require drivers to take on fuel, and changing tyres is optional, and each driver in the feature race will have one fast repair available. So, going away from rules now, we've introduced everything, of course. Let's go over to the live cameras at the circuit and see how everybody is getting ready to go. And we're just checking in with our stewards at the moment. Nothing from our stewards so far, although we are just checking with some of our stewards here. I believe we just had some messages coming. Give us 2 seconds. Okay, so we have not had anything come through, ladies and gentlemen, so we are looking good to go racing, as this practice session is only half a minute away, and it looks as though, at the moment, Matt Caruana is leading the practice session in the Pro category, our P2 man in the Championship for the Pros, of course, but the man who is looking to try and usurp Billy Fletcher, as he really whacks the sausage curve there of turn at number 14, almost sends the car into over 134.135 as he comes across that timeline. Does he improve this time? He does not, but that is our final practice session complete, and just in time for us to go qualifying. And you can imagine it is going to be a very tense qualifying session here, because everything is on the line. As we see there, we get the switch over now to the qualifying session, and it'll be 15 minutes. Who is going to be on pole? Well, here we go then, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody will now be taken to the circuit. They will all be charging out in their drives, and we do have one new driver to introduce tonight, a new Pro driver who will come on to very shortly, and that is going to be Kevin van der Slick, my apologies there, misreading his name, but Kevin van der Slick is joining us from the Netherlands tonight, and he will be in the McLaren MP412C as well. So George Bland will have some company. All our drivers make their way out to the circuit right now, and you can see everybody just trying to find some space. Now, one of the questions you may have with regards to this, how important is slipstream going to be in qualifying? Because we saw at Brands Hatch, it wasn't important. We saw at Monza in round number 8 how critical the slipstream was. Here, it's going to be a case that you want to try and catch a driver coming up to the hairpin at turn 10, so you've got their slipstream in the run down towards the chicane. That's the only place you want it. Because if you catch a driver in the run from, say, turn 1 up towards turn number 9, you can imagine you're going to bunch up very tightly. As we see, Colin Martin here has got somebody behind him, bunching up behind. And I do believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, that is the Delta Motorsport car there, which has just made its way through. That's Jean-Louis Deschamps. As we can see, Colin Martin moving out of the way and releasing Jean-Louis Deschamps to take the lead run around. And he is our first driver to be making their way around to go on to a flying lap. And we'll very shortly ride on board with Jean-Louis Deschamps as he takes us around for a qualifying lap. And also in the Porsche 911, it'll give us a different feel for what it's like to ride in one of these cars. So without further ado, it's over to Jean-Louis Deschamps to take us away for the opening flying lap, but he gets it very wrong as he goes over the curb there of turn at number 14 and just rises too high, and that is the problem with that chicane. You make one mistake and come in too hard on those curbs and you are going for a spin. The rear of the car is just going to kick round, so we won't be expecting Jean-Louis Deschamps to take us around. And instead we look to Colin Martin, and also I believe we've got Rasmussen just making his way around. In fact, he's not quite around as of yet. The Switchback Motorsport driver here making his way through, as we can see some times starting to come in, but these are not indicative times, remember, ladies and gentlemen, because our drivers are just doing their outlaps as it currently stands. But everyone trying to find themselves some space out in circuit, and I believe we do have 40 plus drivers filling up this circuit today. It is a tight circuit, as is for one car, let alone 40 of them. So you can imagine having a bit of breathing room is going to be so critical, as we see Pinball here in the Audi R8 making his way through. The Pro driver here, the first half Pro drivers to put a time up on the board, but do remember that these times are not truly indicative, because we still do have plenty of time to be put in. These are all outlap times that are starting to be registered, as everyone is trying to find themselves some space there. And we are looking at Mark Baker right now as he slices his way through turns 3 and 4 there very smoothly indeed in the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo, and as he now comes all the way up to what is turn at number 6 here, you can see behind him, I believe that is Nigel Stock, who's got a very eager driver coming up behind him. Or is that Ollie Wayne? Well, that's definitely not Ollie Wayne. Here is Ollie Wayne making his way through right now as he comes through the right into left combination here of what is turns 3 and 4, making sure not to attack that wall too hard, as we're still waiting for our first lap times to truly come in. Matt Emmons there going purple for the moment, and he, remember, has switched to the Lamborghini Huracan. And you may be wondering, okay, Matt Emmons seems to be running a rather different livery today. He's running a livery quite similar to what is Billy Fletcher's and also Matt Caruana's cars. Well, that's no surprise, ladies and gentlemen. I should point out to you that he has switched team, Matt Emmons. He has switched to the Luxim My apologies, it's the M&V Esports with Luxim Sim Racing. They're putting in a collaborative team ahead of a future season of this series. We have got a season 2 which is due to occur in the future. More details on that towards the end of this championship. We'll talk more about that in the season finale, but Matt Emmons has changed team in preparation for that, I've come to understand, and hence the change of a livery. But we can see it further around right now. We've got Tony Verschaft here making his way through what is there. That's turns 6 and 7 as he comes free, now makes his way down towards 8 and 9 and 10 as he charges down towards it underneath the GoDaddy billboard, of course, and now heading up towards the third of our 4 chicanes as we start to see our first times come in, and we do see Kevin van der Siddick on his first flying lap in this series setting a 1:34.241 in that McLaren MP4 12 sin. It's good to see a second McLaren out there. Of course, we've only had one in the series so far, and that has been George Bland in the amateur category, but we've now got one in the pro category. And from what I'm hearing down in the paddock, I unfortunately didn't have a chance to really catch up with many of our drivers today, I must admit. A lot of our drivers declined interviews or just did not have time to comment for the simple reason that I think they were very focused on trying to get things set here, given Canada is such a difficult circuit. You can imagine it's the American Monte Carlo, effectively. That's how it's sometimes described in the motor racing world. But Slick right now making his way all the way around on a 34.241, and he's definitely seen as a very fast driver, and one of those drivers that we're going to have to keep our eyes on, as Carolina right now and set a 1:34.37, so he is only 1.3 tenths off of Slick. So these two are going to be quite close, but Billy Fletcher goes faster now with a 1:34.012 as we see both of Luxim drivers there parking up and returning to the garage. Indeed, perhaps working together and trying to get a distant tow in the run down from turn 12 all the way up to 13 and 14 as we see more times coming in. And meanwhile, I should point out that in the amateur class we do have Navarro Dabova, one of the 2 Dabova family members racing in this series. Of course, he is the son, and we have got the father of Jeremy Dabova out there as well, but Navarro Dabova currently the fastest in our amateur category with a time of what is a 1:35.85 and putting in a good performance so far. It's the number 104 driver, and he really has been the story of the series in terms of improving Navarro Dabova. We saw that he struggled to a degree in his opening couple of rounds, and when I say struggled, he seems to be up against it. As he's gone on through the series, he has started to really move up into the midfield, if not starting to sometimes contest upper echelon positions within the amateur class. And Navarro Dabova right now being in that provisional pole position for the amateur class is a sign of his improvement and how far he's come. Indeed, he's been getting a lot of respect from some of the drivers in the amateur class with regards to how much he has been improving over the series, and I think whilst he may not openly say it sometimes, I think his dad's very proud of his son as well. As we look to George Bland meanwhile, who our championship leader in the amateur class right now, does have a little bit of traffic ahead of him. He does have the amateur Porsche there, and I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, that is one of the challenge mobiles that's in the way there. But of course, both drivers on a lap, and I believe Bland is trying to use the Porsche as a tow cable here in order to give him a little bit of extra speed in the run up towards 13 and 14. We're just going to watch these guys as they make their way down towards what is the right into left, the final chicane, of course, with the world champions on the right side of it, to see how these two play out. But of course, in such a situation as this, you do have to back off when you're in the tow of another car as they both make their way through, and you can see how sensitive the pair of them are. They do not want to make contact with that wall at all, because that could spell utter doom for their qualifying session as they both cross that timing line. And it is the case that it's Kurt Van Harnacker ahead, who does improve to a 36.925, but he is the best part of over a second off of that provisional pole in the amateur class. Now, meanwhile, as we continue to look down, and to give you an idea, right now, I should point out, we don't quite have 40 drivers out on circuit. We have got 34 drivers here. We have got Jeremy Dabova, who is making his way around right now on his first flying lap. So we went from the son earlier to the father in the pro category, and Dabova will be looking for a good result today after what has been a difficult string of results recently. And meanwhile, we've just seen the time coming from Robert de Soenik, the Dutchman, who has just set what was there. It was a 35.62, and that's putting provisional P7 in the pro class and overall as well. Now we're checking with you guys and girls in the chat as well, and we can see Katie Eames there saying good evening in the Facebook chat. It's good to see you, Katie. Good clean racing tonight, you hope? Indeed, we do hope for perhaps a little bit less of an instant field race compared to Brands Hatch, but of course sometimes instants help to spice things up somewhat. But as our drivers make their way around for the time being, we continue to see them surging around the circuit right now. Just checking in with our stewards once again. We're not hearing anything at this present time, but if we do hear anything in the meantime, we will let you know. But everything seems to be a-okay for the time being. Now we should hop over to another one of our amateur drivers, and that is Mark Sykes. Now, whilst I didn't have the chance to get a driver's thoughts going into the race tonight, although a number of drivers did sort of hint to me, or at least that I heard them in conversations with one another saying they're hoping for not too many incidents tonight, and how important track position and qualifying would be, and particularly the strategy as well in the feature race. One driver who was talking a little bit down the paddock was Mark Sykes. Now, the English driver, who we've seen have some very difficult results recently, what he was talking about is the fact that people are asking about his new livery, and you can see that on the Lamborghini Huracan. You can see it in the centre of your picture. We've got its derriere pointing to us right now, and as he makes his way through turn at number 12, the camera will switch over here, and Mark Sykes is running a special livery today. Now, this is a livery replicating the Zealous Motorsports livery, and Mark was commissioned by the Zealous Motorsports team to produce this livery. So he's running this, essentially, this livery on the behalf of them as he was commissioned. Fantastic livery, and a very unique livery compared to some of the liveries we do have here. Of course, all of our liveries are unique, and that's not to take away from the work any of our drivers have done. But Mark Sykes, of course, his company, Mark Sykes Designs, he specialises in liveries and design work, and a good number of drivers' liveries that are being featured here on the circuit and in the series have been produced somewhat, if not to the full extent, by Mark Sykes, and he's showing us once again his artistic skills. Very talented man, and if you are looking for an iRacing livery, you may want to get in touch with this man, because I'm sure that he would be able to work with you to knock up an absolute treat of a livery. But still, after shouting out for Mark Sykes Designs, we can see right now he's currently P25 overall, and in terms of class, he is P13 in the amateur class right now. And for Sykes, he'll be looking to try and just settle into this race. He had a very difficult time last time out of Brands Hatch. It wasn't to be in either the sprint or the feature, and he needs a good result today. He needs to find that momentum. But with 10 minutes of the qualifying session complete, 5 minutes to go, of course, the big question on a lot of our drivers' minds right now will be how much further can they go in this qualifying session in terms of getting themselves up the order. Well, if we look back to our pro drivers, as we see Fletcher there absolutely attacking the turn 14 sausage curve there and sending the car flying. And you have to imagine with an attack like that, well, he was green in sector 1, but sectors 2 and 3, he was down his previous best. All of our drivers absolutely pushed it to the limit, and none more so than Fletcher. And for the Luxin 24 driver, in his mind, I think he's conscious of the fact that his teammate is very much closing up the gap to him, and it is the case that right now he needs to find a way to give himself some point breathing room between himself and Caruana. But also do not rule out some of the other drivers here who may be able to interfere in that. And if both Fletcher and Caruana have a disastrous pair of results, you never know what could happen in terms of other drivers getting back into that mix. It only takes one pair of non-finishes and we could see that championship table turn upside down immediately. But looking from the top of our pro class to a bit further down right now, we can see Deegan Fairclough going around and setting a lap. He has not set an indicative lap so far. His opening lap was a 41.37, but I do believe from Fairclough we are expecting some more laps to come in due course as he makes his way there through what is turns 3 and 4 and just misses the wall there, going more and more adventurous with each and every pass as he comes charging all the way down now. In fact, that was not through turns 3 and 4. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. That was through turns 8 and 9 as he comes through turn 10 hairpin right now. 2 corners quite similar in terms of their complexities, but of course we need to make sure we do get things right for you as he makes his way along. And just up ahead of him we can see, I believe that is Matthew Addy, our amateur driver. Of course, Addy, a very strong driver, and I do believe it's the case, ladies and gentlemen, and we are working it right now. That livery that you do see on Addy's car, the black with the green, is not his full livery, and it is something which the stewards have been talking to me about. We are going to try and get that fixed for you in the break between the 2 races, because Addy does have an absolutely cracking livery which you would love to see. And right now, whilst his qualifying is not absolutely cracking, he's currently P10 in the amateur class, P24 overall. We can assure you that his driving is absolutely smashing. He has been doing very well in this series to date, and we've got that livery which we'd love to get visible to you. As we have now only 12 minutes, well, we've completed 12 minutes, I should say, and 2.5 minutes remaining. It is the case that now everybody winding up, and I should say, in terms of people winding up, we've had somebody who's wound their way up to a provisional P13 overall and pole provisionally in the amateur class, and that is Alexander Batak with an absolutely sensational time. And if you give me a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen, what I will show you is with regards to the classes, you can see that for Batak there, it is an absolutely phenomenal, at a 35.713. It is 1.5 tenths tenths clear of Navarro de Bova, and that 1.5 tenths here at Montreal is a major advantage, and we do wait to see whether Navarro is going to be able to respond as we now look back to our normal timing screens. And meanwhile, as our drivers continue to make their way around here, we see Matt Emmons in the Lamborghini Huracan, currently P3 in the amateur class in this qualifying session, only 2 tenths off of Navarro de Bova, and trying to hunt down Navarro with a brief amount of time remaining. He's got 1 or 2 more laps in the tank, as we do see Emmons there backing off through turns 3 and 4. I think the rear end started to kick out slightly, a bit of oversteer on the exit of turn number 3, and that unsettled the car, and he wanted to avoid hitting the wall, otherwise that would have spelled certain doom to the rest of his qualifying session. But as he now makes his way through at 6 and 7 and heads down towards 8 and 9, Emmons winding himself up for one final attack lap as he makes his way all the way around the circuit. But I do think for Batak, he has parked up in the pits, he's not going to go again, and will Navarro de Bova, I should say, be able to improve as well? Can he take the contest to Alexander Batak as he makes his way through turns 8 and 9 and now makes it all the way down towards the hairpin? Will he be able to, or will it be a case that he's not got enough in the tank? As Caruana does improve to 134.021, only 9 thousandths off of our overall pole man of Billy Fletcher, and that's also the battle for pole position in the pro class, it should be pointed out. It is getting very tight up there indeed, as I believe all of these guys are going to have one more lap in the tank with regards to the time available. Whether they got the fuel for it, that's another question entirely. Of course, our drivers will want to have the lightest possible car they can for this qualifying session. Less fuel means less weight to push around, and therefore you get greater speed in the acceleration zones, and particularly on long straights such as the run from turn number 10 up to turns 13 and 14. And we see Navarro coming through here right now, and as he comes across that timing line, does he improve? It does not look to be an improvement. He does improve, and he improves to 35.791, but it's not enough to close the gap to Batak to get himself right there in the overall. But he's closed the gap to De Vlaming in P15. Vlaming, of course, in the pro categories. We do see Robert de Sunic improving to P8 overall with a 35.250. The pro driver here making his mark and trying to contest that full throw with Deegan Fairclough. And Deegan Fairclough, should be pointed out, in fact, has put in a brilliant lap off camera, moving up to that P7 overall, as we see of DD Vlaming now improving to P12 overall. Good lap there, 35.660. What more has he got there as he come? Well, in fact, he's come to the end of his qualifying session, I do believe here. So it's now the case that everybody will be putting in the final laps. Matt Caruana's into the pits. Billy Fletcher has also retired to the pits. So can any of our other pro drivers find a way of improving here, as we do see Slick making his way up into the hairpin, and we see, oh goodness me, and that is going to get very, very caged up indeed, as we see Pinbow having to move out the way there. But Matt Emmons, I think, was compromised into the braking zone for the hairpin at turn 10, and that is not going to help out either driver there as they make their way through, and not many drivers out on circuit right now. So can Kevin Van der Slick improve and get himself onto that front row? We see Ben Hicks improves to P14 overall with 35.699. That puts him P14 in the pro class as well. Slick pulls into the pits here. Do we see any more laps on the horizon from anyone? I think Navarro de Bova is coming through, as we see Mattens has backed off. He has aborted his lap there. Can de Bova improve and get ahead of Batak come the end? Is it going to be enough here as he crosses that line? It's not enough, and that means that Alexander Batak will take pole position in the amateur class. And for our pro class, it is Billy Fletcher who has taken pole position, as we see Edward Lack here, our driver who provided the reference lap, in the end moves up to P8 with 35.234, a last ditch effort, and it has been rewarded. And we also see a DD Vlaming here coming across that timeline one last time. In fact, he's been able to creep one more lap in, and is he able to improve here? It does not look to be an improvement, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of qualifying. Fletcher on pole with his teammate and championship rival Matt Caruana alongside him, as we now wait to get underway with the sprint race. And in the amateur class, meanwhile, Alexander Batak will line up P15 overall, and that's pole position for the amateurs, and alongside him will be Navarro de Bova. And it's going to be brilliant to see the two of them go toe-to-toe. They've not raced against one another from the front row of the amateur class, and it should also be pointed out, if you look at that timing screen on your left-hand side, our pros have completely segregated themselves from the amateur class here. So it is the case that we are going to be seeing all of our pros line up at the head of the pack, and all the amateurs line up at the rear of the pack, which is the first time we have seen that in this series. It's never happened before, and how about that? Without further ado then, let's get to that grid which is starting to form, as I believe all of our drivers are taking their places for the partial manual double foal rolling start. And I say partial because it's a partial lap. They're not completing a full lap of the circuit as part of the warm-up. They're starting on turn number 12, so going up the Casino straight towards turns 13 and 14. But as we look towards our pack right now, we can see the grid. And that grid, the front 6 rows, Billy Fletcher lines up on pole with a 1:34.012, a very close qualifying session between himself and Matt Caruana in the end, the two of them being separated only by 9 thousandths of a second. Kevin van der Slick and Pinball line up on the second row. Der Slick on his debut, doing a fantastic job there to get himself in P3. Øystein Herford and Tony Verschaft are completing our third row there. The Norwegian and the Dutchman will go toe-to-toe, and then Deegan Fairclough and Edward Lapp line up on the fourth row. Robert de Sunic and Jean-Louis Deschamps completing our fifth row, and then Jeremy de Bover and DD Vlaming lining up on our sixth row of our top 6, and that completes our grid that we can see there on the screen. Without further ado, we now clear that time screens. As you can see here, we do have quite a lot of cloud over. It's a very cloudy conditions here today, but we have got a reasonable temperature, and as a result, that may play into the hands of some drivers. Perhaps some drivers will favour the slightly lower temperature conditions, but we will wait and see as we now get ready to go racing. And it will be Billy Fletcher who takes us away for the rolling start. Now, as they all pull off, of course, it's going to be critical to get a good run here, because you can imagine when they all concertina their way down into the Virage de Senna, which is turns 1 and 2, it's going to be very tight, and we're going to be expecting a lot of potential overtakes here. And can Caruana get the jump on Fletcher, or will Fletcher be able to hold on to his lead? Perhaps he'll be able to find a way to simply place himself well and get the jump on Caruana. And what about Van der Slick? Will he be able to get himself involved there, as we now wait for Fletcher to take us to the green? And we are green, we are go, go, go for the sprint race. It's race 1 of round number 10, and Fletcher's had a good start with Van der Slick trying to get on the inside here of Matt Caruana into turn 1. And we can see the McLaren driver has got the move done nice and early, whereas Pinbo's trying to go all the way around the outside. The Audi driver hasn't got the grip, however, as they now make their way up towards turns 3 and 4. Behind, Øystein Herford is holding on to that P5 at the time, with Deegan Fairclough on the pursuit. Meanwhile, further back, we can see Edward Lack there. Hasn't had the best of starts, not able to gain, hasn't lost anything, however, and just has to wait in behind. Meanwhile, further down, I can tell you that Navarro de Bova battling right now with DD Vlaming here, and as they make their way through the right into left combination here, as they come through turn 5 and up into 6 and 7, you can see it's the fact Navarro de Bova has got past DD Vlaming, and Alexander Batak is trying to find his way past the pro driver here, and as a result, this is buying Navarro de Bova time, as behind we've got George Bland battling with what is Mikel Andreas, and the slow and steady racing driver ahead, and the Briton trying to get into the fight as well, as they both come charging through in towards what is turns 8 and 9, and they settle back into an order here, but we are, oh goodness me, Bland has gone for a spin, he comes back across the circuit, and it's absolute carnage at the start of the race, as we can see everybody coming through behind, as literally just come into the path of Bland's car, and I'm not sure if there was contact there with regards to Bland. Let's take a look back and find out what happened. So as he's making his way up into the corner, we look to another one of our cameras here, and as he made his way through, the rear end just snapped on him, it went no contact, and then that car was just wayward, and it was the case that everybody having to try and stop their cars or just pray they could make it through. Well, my goodness, that was absolute drama. But as we go from Bland back up towards our leaders after one lap, it is Billy Fletcher leading ahead of Kevin van der Silt, followed by Matt Caruana. Then we've got Pinbo in P4, Øystein Herford in P5, Deegan Fairclough in P6, then Tony Verschaft in P7, Edward Lack in P8, Robert de Sunic in P9, and then we've got Jean-Louis Deschamps in P10. Outside our top 10, Jeremy de Bover in P11, Ben Hicks in P12, then we've got Colin Martin in P13. All these drivers being pros, and then our first amateur driver, that is of course Navarro de Bover here in P14, having had a brilliant start. He's got DD Vlaming all over the back of him in P15, and then we've got Alexander Batak here in P16, our second place amateur driver, followed by Mikel Andreasen in P17, and then Ollie Wayne in P18, and Matthew Addy in P19, and completing our top 20 it is Oosterhuis as he makes his way through the switchback motorsport driver here. Coming through the right-hander there, and now charging all the way down towards turns 8 and 9. But meanwhile, as we look back to Navarro de Bova versus GT3 Villeneuve here, we can see no change between the two of them as they make their way through 8 and 9. And I think for de Bova right now, the challenge by DB driver, he's just trying to keep de Villeneuve behind him, because you can imagine if he can do this, he'll have a pro essentially acting as his rear gunner, and that is a very awkward situation for Batak to try and get through, because he'll be thinking to himself, well, I'm not racing Villeneuve, I'm racing de Bova, but to get to the guy I want to race, I've got to pass on who quote-unquote is expected to be the faster driver, and that is a challenge in of itself. And also, think from Villeneuve's perspective, he wants to get past de Bova right now, and de Bova will not want to let him through. He'll want to hold him in there as we look up ahead, and we can see Fletcher. What's happened to Fletcher? Oh, goodness me, has he hit the wall? Or is it a case that something has gone horrifically wrong, because Fletcher is dropped down to P4, or has he just got it wrong at the World Champions? We'll take a look back very shortly, but what that means is on his debut in race number 1, it's Kevin van der Sille who's currently leading after 2 laps of the Canadian circuit right now. Montreal is causing major drama, and I think Fletcher's got a problem. He's opened up and let another bunch of drivers through here. We are going to try and find out what exactly happened to Fletcher very shortly. In fact, we're getting the feed now. So as he made his way through, it was the case that he backed off there on the exit of turns 13 and 14. Something's just gone wrong with Fletcher's car, because there was the case that Caruana tried to find the attack on Van der Sille, but it's just not worked out, and Fletcher is in a terrible state right now, and I do wonder what's gone wrong with that car. We'll wait and see. We'll keep an eye on his lap times, but it is not a good place to be for Fletcher, or if you're a fan of Fletcher right now, it is not a good day at the office as it currently stands. As we look back up towards our race leaders who are battling right now, Slick in the front of your pitch, then we've got Caruana in the middle, and then behind we've got Pinbao who's trying to close up on the pair of them as they make their way down towards the Casino Straight once again. And will we see a potential attack here from Caruana as we jump on board with a Huracan driver? He's a bit far back this time, however. I think he's got a long way to go before he can find a move, or if he's going to go for it, he's going to have to send it from very far back. But I think it's too early even in the sprint race to contemplate that, as they both make their way through 13 and 14, and you can see the McLaren driver there just missing the World Champions by a tiny margin. Indeed, both are doing so, but Slick pushed it to the absolute limit, and Caruana goes to the move. He looks to the outside here into turn 1. Will he be able to get the switch back or go all the way round to the inside of turn 2? He looks for it, but the door's shut. He's not close enough as they make their way through. These two getting closer and closer, and we're expecting the battle to erupt between the two of them very shortly. As meanwhile, I'm hearing that there's been a bit of an incident involving Alexander Batak of some description where he's dropped down the order. Let's find out what's happened here. He hasn't changed place, it should be pointed out. He's still in P16 and P2 for the amateurs, but we are hearing there's been a bit of an incident between himself and I believe Villeneuve. Let's take a look. So this was on the previous lap as they were making their way down here, and we're going to see Batak try and go up the inside here. I think he just simply lunged it from too far back, and yes, it was the case that Villeneuve went for the cutback, and then you can see there just a little bit further back, Mikkel Andreasen trying to find a way in the slow and steady racing driver, but wasn't able to find it. As we go back to our live pictures here, and it is the case, I think Colin Martin has just been passed by Austin Hereford here as they make their way through turns 8 and 9, and it is the case Colin Martin has just been passed for P12. But looking at further down our order, I believe we have had a couple of instants kick off, and Rishung, oh goodness me, the Mercedes driver here has had a nightmare spin. That's at turns 6 and 7. What's happened to Rishung? Well, that was moments ago as he was coming out the pits. That's not the interesting part. It's the bit afterwards we want to know. And this was as he was coming through up into turns 6 and 7 here. And as he makes his way in to the corner, does the rear end just snap loose on him through the corner? It does indeed. And the rear end has gone. And it's the case that he's just had to wait for our drivers to come through and get himself some clear track. But now as they go racing once again here, we look back up towards our leaders, Slick versus Caruana. They continue the fight as they make their way through turns 2 and up towards 3 and 4 right now. And you can see that Caruana all over the back. He is literally trying to get in the mind of Slick as much as he possibly can here. But it's the case that a Dutchman knows where he can defend, knows where he doesn't need to defend. And that's so critical at a circuit like Gilles Villeneuve, where you don't need to necessarily focus on defending at certain corners because it's just not feasible to overtake, and that gives him a breather, where at other circuits it may be the case that the driver behind can be an ever-present threat, because there's just places you do not overtake. For example, going through a chicane, if you're not alongside on the inside going into the chicane, there is no way through. As we're hearing that Edward Lack has just fallen down the order to an extent, we will take a look at that very shortly, and Tony Verschaft has got ahead. up into P4 as our leaders make their way through here. We continue to watch them briefly as they come down towards turn 10. Will we see a move from Caruana here? He's going to look to the inside, but he's not close enough, and instead actually has to throw the car to the outside. They're carrying so much momentum that he's gone for a cutback. He's lost time at the hairpin, but what time he's lost, he will gain, of course, now in terms of building up the speed as he makes his way down the Casto Straight here, and they come through the Kinker 12, and you can see the gap between the two of them. I think it's just too much time a day for him to be able to get the move on here, as we do see Slick goes a little bit defensive, but then returns to the racing line at the last possible moment. And as they come through here, it's no change between the two of them. Half the race completed, half the sprint still remaining, and the battle between these two rages on as they go on to lap number 6. And as they come all the way down towards turn number 1, there's no move from Caruana. He does go for it. Caruana does look for it. He's not able to find it. He's not able to perturb Slick enough in order to try and get Slick to go overly deep into turn 1. He knew it was coming. Knew it was coming. But meanwhile, we can see that Ben... Oh, goodness me, what's happening? And Colin Martin goes for a tumble there through turn at number 1. I think there may have been some contact as he's now got to wait for the field to come through. And there have been some changes between drivers here. And let's take a look back at what happened there. So this was moments ago, and I do believe that I think was Jeremy Debova just behind, unless I'm mistaken. And I think it was the case that the door was shut on Jeremy Debova by Colin Martin. The stewards are going to take a look at that one, but it's one of those situations where I think we had so many drivers trying to go into turn 1 together that they all fell out of place, as I'm hearing that Matthew Addy has just been involved in a significant incident. What's happened to Matthew Addy? That Ferrari has not had a good day at the office. Well, the rear wing is already heavily damaged here for Matthew Addy, so whatever's happened has happened earlier in the lap. I can only assume he's hit the wall at turn 8 and 9, if anything. So, and then he's gone for the spin with the lack of downforce there. So Addy having a difficult sprint race. But as we look back up towards our leaders right now, they're as close as they have been, and even more so as it's Slick versus Caruana, and Addy's going to be right there moving off the racing line, and Caruana's going to try and go around the outside through the chicane here in the braking zone, but Slick holds on. He goes deeper on the brakes, but look at the two of them taking the momentum out of one another, and Caruana literally tapping the back of Slick's McLaren as the Huracan driver tries to go around the outside now into turn 1. Now, will he be able to do it through Raj Desena as they go into turns 1 and 2? You can see Slick defending everywhere he can right now until they get onto the tight section from turn 3 to turn number 9, and Slick holds on for now, but behind you can imagine that Deegan Fairclough, who's come a good way up through the field. He has gained 4 places so far. He's in P3 at the moment, with Pinball losing a lot of places earlier on, and we're not sure as to why he lost the places. We know Pinball has dropped down the order, but we can see Deegan Fairclough right now in P3. He's got Tony Vachaf chasing after him, only 6 tenths behind, but these two are having a very happy race right now if they can keep their minds together, and I think they will definitely, as Pinball is down in P5. I think there was a mistake early on from the Audi driver which saw him lose out, as we're hearing Stefan Gamble Rasmussen has jumped to the pits. So the amateur driver has jumped to the pits and is effectively out of contention for this race. He will be rejoining most likely, but I don't think he's going to have the time in the race to be able to make any gains. And meanwhile, we can see Oystein Hereford here. He's on the offensive versus Ben Hicks as we jump on board with Oystein as he comes through the chicane there at turns 8 and 9 and makes his way down towards the hairpin. But you can see this sequence of cars here, the sequence of pro cars from Hereford in P11 up to Dasunik in P8, where they're all that close to one another that they're getting the slipstream of Dasunik effectively as they come through the right-hander here. And as they come through, you can see it's the case that Hereford has to go a little bit deep there because of how they're all bunching up under braking, and nobody really able to find a way through in this pack right now. As we look back to the blimp camera, and you can see as they all charge through, we look at the head of the pack, Dasunik here, who's got the growing pressure of Jean-Louis Deschamps behind him, the Team Racing Netherlands driver, and as all 4 of them come through here, they just cannot find a way to get an advantage as we see them all make their way through. And then we come to the lower down camera, of course, and as they come charging up towards turn 1, I do think that Hicks is under pressure right now. It's Ben Hicks in the Ignium Motorsport Huracan versus Oystein Hereford, trying to go around the outside to inside through 1 into 2. Oh, and goodness me, there's been contact. There has been contact, and you can see Oystein there immediately parking the car at 9. I think in his mind the contact was caused by him. That's great sportsmanship shown by the Norwegian, and it is the case he's going to drop the position to Jeremy Debova, but in return he's enabled enable Ben Hicks to continue racing. Of course, the stewards will applaud that sportsmanship. They may still apply a penalty depending on whether it's reported by Ben Hicks, but sportsmanship is encouraged between our drivers, and that's great to see there as they make their way now down into turns 6 and 7. And you see Jeremy Debova going defensive here. He'll want to hold on to that P11 for now, because that will place him quite well for the purposes of the feature race as they make their way out to 7 and now down towards 8 and 9. And Heifer gets in very close. And meanwhile, between our race leaders, we can see they battled into the hairpin. There's been a change of place as the sun now shines, the clouds are clearing, and as they make their way down the run towards 13 and 14, it is the case. It's the McLaren versus the Huracan. We've got the British engine in one, and we've got an Audi engine, although don't tell Lamborghini that. We've got an Audi engine in the other. It's Britain versus Germany, effectively, as they come roaring down into 13 and 14, and as they come through the chicane, it is the case that right now they make their way through. Both drivers almost hitting the war champions there, and as they come across that timeline, once again, you can see Caruana's going to try and go around the outside into turn 1. He tried this before, and he's got more momentum this time, and he holds it as Slick hits the inside curve. Van der Slick loses it briefly, and Caruana is through into lead with a daring overtake. My goodness, what a move for the lead, and that is why Caruana is seen as a prodigy in this series. Remember, he's only 15 years old and he's absolutely flying. He just seems to be able to find a way through. But from singing his praises right now, we also got to sing the praises of Fairclough and Verschaft, who are keeping it together very close, and behind them Pinball is under pressure now from Billy Fletcher, who dropped down the order earlier on. And Pinball is now under that increasing pressure here with only one more lap to go after this one. And these guys will be coming together in short order. I can imagine Fletcher would love a shot to take on the Audi driver here as they make their way through 8 and 9 and head down towards the hairpin at turn 10. Meanwhile, further back, we can see that Oisin Herford is still behind Jeremy Debova. He has not found a way past as the BMW man. And he's not been able to find a way past the Porsche machine there as they make their way through 8 and 9. Now, as with one more lap after this one still to go, you can imagine for these guys it's going to be do and die very shortly. But speaking of do and die, meanwhile in the run through turn 12 and now to the Casino Straight, you can see it's Fletcher on the offensive versus Pinball. Fletcher's going to be made to go all the way around there, as we also see as he goes there, Verschaft and Fairclough in a similar situation, that Fletcher's going to try and make it count. There's only room for one and they scrape doors here and they both just make it through. Oh my goodness, great respect shown between the two of them. I think both drivers there felt the other one was going to back out, but Fletcher managed to make it count. But he had Pinball there, who had to be very obliging, and to be fair, Pinball did everything he could to stay in there, and both of them right on the limit, and that was fantastic to see. Well, you can overtake through the corners, you can't overtake through. I've been proven wrong. And meanwhile, further down the order in the battle for what is P3 in the amateur class, it is Mikael Andreasen under pressure from Ollie Wayne. Wayne going for the move here on the final lap as they come through turns 1 and 2. Wayne's got a bit deep, and Andreasen's gone deep as well. And as they both come back together, Wayne holds the position for the time in. A little bit of door-to-door there, but they've kept it relatively clean so far as they make the way up into 3 and 4. And behind them, you can see it's Who's to Who's. And then we also got Colin Martin, albeit Martin, while the pro drivers tucked in behind 3 of the amateur drivers here. And I wonder for Andreasen how long it'll be before the switchback motorsport car behind goes on the offensive. We see Andreasen gets it wrong at the braking, and as a result, loses the place, loses the rear of the car. And now Who's to Who's is up into that position there, but it's now one of those situations where Andreasen's got to get it back together as quickly as possible, because there's still places out there to be taken as they make their way through towards the final half of the lap. Meanwhile, Oisin Herford on the offensive versus Jeremy Debova into their hairpin. Debova goes defensive to the inside, but meanwhile, as the race comes to its conclusion, Matt Caruana makes his way through the chicane and he completes race number 1, taking the checkered flag and in. You can see the weaving from side to side already. He's pleased with it, and he takes the win in the sprint race at Montreal. Kevin van der Silt with a P2 on his debut, a fantastic drive. Deegan Fairclough P3 on the podium, Tony Verschaft as well. We can also see Billy Fletcher and Pinball coming together briefly, but Fletcher ahead of Bow in the end. Ed Lack in P7, Robert Asunik in P8, Jean-Louis Deschamps in P9, Ben Hicks in P10, Jeremy Debova in P11, and then look at this, this, Navarro de Bova takes his first win in the series in the amateur class. He takes the win in the sprint race. A brilliant drive from Navarro de Bova, nailed the start, put distance between himself and the rest of the pursuing amateurs, and he takes the win in the amateur class, and also a P12 overall. A brilliant result, a season best there. GT3 Villeneuve in the end finishing P13 overall. Alexander Batak second place in the amateur class, P14 overall. Oystein Herford P15 overall. Ollie Wayne P16 overall, and that is P3. That's third place in the amateur class. And then Usto's just missing out on what was that third place, and then coming home in what was P17 overall, fourth place in the amateur class. And then we've got Colin Martin there, P18 overall. He'll be looking for a better result. He'll be our second highest placed pro driver outside of Harry Melvin in the reverse grid for the feature race. Mikkel Andreasen in P5 in the end after that disastrous ending to his race. And then it's Arjan Bakker completing our top 20. That's P6 in the amateur class. Now, don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen, because very shortly we'll be bringing you post-race interviews with our winners of the sprint race. But until then, we'll be right back very shortly. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, well, without further ado, let's conduct our post-race interviews for the sprint race, and we'll start off with our pro winner, and that is Matt Caruana. Hello, Matt, can you hear me?
Hi.
Matt, another win to add to your tally, the sprint race at Montreal. Congratulations on the win. How do you feel?
That was a good race. That was really tough to get past him and stay ahead there. We had some good battles, but in the end, I managed to get in front of him into turn one and keep the lead. So yeah, it was a really good race.
It was a very close qualifying session between yourself, your teammate Fletcher, and also Van der Silkenen. I think it was 9 thousandths that separated yourself and Fletcher. Was there a little bit more in the tank, or was that literally on the limit of what you could do?
I think I did it. The lap was pretty good, and me and Billy both got a bit of tow, so I think that might have helped a bit. But he did a really good job in qualifying. So
And then in the race, it looked as though you didn't have the smoothest of starts. I think you lost the position to Van der Silk quite early on. Just take us through the start and what happened there.
yeah, Billy went. I didn't expect Billy to go as late as he did, so I was sort of expecting him to go a bit earlier, and it caught me out a bit. And then Kevin, I think, got on my inside into turn one, and I just had to wait after that.
And then, whilst we didn't see what happened to Fletcher, it was almost as if once Fletcher had moved out the way on the start-finish straight, you immediately started to build that momentum for the attack because you tried into turn one about the midpoint of the race and it didn't quite work. And then you tried again a bit later. Was that always your strategy to go into turn one?
Yeah, I think after Billy had that slowdown, I was thinking about where I can go for the move, and turn one is quite a good place since it's one of the widest parts of the track. So I was thinking there, and the hairpin was quite good to get a good run as well. So yeah.
Well, it was an absolutely brilliant pass and great racing respect shown between yourself and Van der Slick. And now looking forward to the feature race. What's your goal in mind for the feature? Are we looking for another back to front run?
I mean, I think this feature race is going to be carnage. So my aim is just don't get caught up in any incidents, and hopefully then I'll get a good result.
Well, we have our fingers crossed for you, as I'm sure many of the fans tuning in do as well. But until then, congratulations on the win in the sprint, and we look forward to seeing you out on circuit in the feature.
Thank you.
Well, hearing there from Caruana, a brilliant drive then from Caruana, of course. And now we look forward to seeing what he can do in the feature. But let's introduce to the interview box Navarro de Bova, our amateur winner. Alrighty, without further ado, let's bring him in. Hello, Navarro, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Navarro, congratulations on your win in the sprint race. Your first win in this series. How does it feel to have taken to the top step of the podium?
It feels very good. I'm so happy with this prestation.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant to hear, and you did it in absolute form. In qualifying, in the end, out-qualifying the rest of the amateur field by a 10th. Was it the perfect lap, or do you think there was more out there?
It was more than I think.
I see, and then coming on to the race, you had a really good start, and you managed to put, I think it was GT3 Villeneuve between yourself and Alexander Patak. Was that your goal, to try and put one of the pros between yourself and the rest of the amateurs?
Yeah.
And then for the rest of the race, did you have any sort of strategy in mind, or was it just trying to pull as much of a gap as possible?
Didi stay behind me for protecting me.
I see, and you use that to just give yourself the space.
Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant to hear. And now, of course, it means that you're going to be starting at the back of the amateur field for the feature race. How are you feeling going into the 1 hour feature?
I'm going to do my best that I can.
Well, we wish you all the best in the feature. Good luck and congratulations on your win once again.
Thank you very much.
Well, brilliant to hear there from the younger member of the Debova family. I think very excited at the win, and perhaps a man of few words, but still very happy with everything considered, and now getting his mindset, of course, for the feature race. And I'm sure, as I've seen, whilst you can't see it, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that as soon as the race finished, his dad's gone to him and absolutely celebrated, and a lot of guys down in the paddock as well are very happy to hear that one of our youngest members in the paddock has picked up his first win in the series, which is an absolutely brilliant story to tell at Montreal. Now, don't go anywhere. We will be back in approximately 10 minutes for what is the feature race. But until then, just get yourself ready. Go get yourself a bit of popcorn, alternatively a drink, because it is, as Caruana said, it could be carnage, but it's definitely going to be excited. You will not want to miss it. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back then in preparation for the feature race. We briefly had a word there from one of our two main sponsors, Apex Racing Academy, of course, and we're very grateful to have them on board alongside Next Level Racing for this GT3 Championship. But now we turn our attention to the formation of the grid for the feature, the second race of proceedings at the Gilles Villeneuve circuit, Montreal, Quebec in Canada. And as we see the grid started to form, let's take you through that reverse grid, or at least the first 6 rows. So as we can see here, we have lined up on pole. This time it is Stefan Gamberg Rasmussen, the Danishman, having that disastrous race number 1, much like Rishung, they're the MMV Esports driver. The Switchback Motorsport driver starts on pole, MMV Esports driver starts in second place. Our second row consists of George Bland and Matthew Addy. Bland, of course, having that major incident on the opening lap, which was very unfortunate, and Bland has put his hand up to the incident we have heard down in the paddock. Addy in P4, Chris Keenan in P5, Oosterhuis in P6, Kurt Van Hoenacker in P7 in the McChallenged by DB Machine, and Mark Sykes started at P8. Deegan Fairclough, the first of our pros there, started in P9, and then Darren Doherty in P10. Although I've got a question over Deegan Fairclough, given the fact that he finished quite high up, as I was to understand it, in the sprint race. Mark Baker in P11 and Arjan Kregel in P12. But without further ado then, let's get racing. In fact, Fairclough did have that instant towards the end now that my memory is jogged. But we can see here, we do have Rishung and Stefan Gamberg Rasmussen taking us away. It's going to be Rasmussen in particular, as we have heard that Mark Sykes has jumped to the pits, and as a result, he'll be starting from the pit lane here. I think Sykes is starting to start out the way of the potential trouble. As all our drivers make their way down the Casino Straight right now, it is to Rasmussen to take us away for the feature race. He'll be taking us to the green. And we are green, and we are going racing for 1 hour of the feature race. Race number 2 at Montreal, and you can see already both Rasmussen and also Young having a slow start, and Bland goes on the offensive very early on there, as we see Keenan in the BMW trying to get his way into the mix as well. That is in the yellow BMW, that's going around the outside, and we've already got a spin. That's Darren Doherty involved in the mix as they all come together through turn at number 2 here, and we can see cars off that shot, can see it into the wall there with also, that's, I believe, that is Andreasen caught up against the wall with, you can see we've got a major incident further down there in the run out of turn 2. A lot of cars scattered to the wind as we look a little bit further back, and that's Jean-Louis Deschamps also caught up there. Edward Lack, I believe that's also Ben Hicks caught up in it all, and we will take a look back at that very shortly. But what I can tell you with all of that erupting, that right now it is George Bland leading and Matthew Addy tucked in behind in at what is P2. And then we've got Oosterhuis in at P3 behind them. It's been the case that for Addy right now, he's had a good start. Bland's had a fantastic start, and then we've got Oosterhuis and Young tucking in behind, and Keenan just back there as we are hearing more drivers drop in down the field. I believe we've got a car spun there on what is the run into turns 10, 6 and 7. We've got, oh goodness me, and that is Pinbao up on his roof right now. What has happened to Pinbao? He's upside down there. Goodness me, this race has opened up horrifically in terms of the number of incidents right now, and Pinbao just on his roof, and I think a lot of drivers are going to be very frustrated with how their race has started out right now. We will be expecting a good number of jumps to the pits, but meanwhile, speaking of jumping from the pits to a driver, we see Arjan Kregel here trying to go for the move on Chris Keenan into the chicane, but he's not able to find it through turns 13 and 14 as they make their way through. Pinbao has jumped to the pits, I can tell you, and as they all make their way through, we've got a battle for the race lead. It's Matthew Addy versus George Bland here as they go on to lap number 2. So after one lap, it is Bland leading ahead of Addy here in P2. Who's in P3, followed by Rishung in P4. Chris Keenan in P5. He's been under pressure from Arjun Kriegel though in P6. Darren Doherty P7. Then we've got Kurt Van Harnack at P8. Austin Herford, the first of our pro drivers in P9, having cleared all the debris from what was turn 2 on the opening lap. Alexander Batak in P10. Mark Baker in P11 right now, but he has got the pressure on the road over behind him, and Navarro's already made up a good number of places. 10 places made by Navarro, as we can see Baker having a really poor run out of turn 4, and as they come through 5 here, Navarro's going to come through, and Baker has moved off the racing line, and I'm wondering if Baker's got a punch. In fact, that car is stopping. Baker has pulled off the line completely. There's an issue with that car, and as he does rejoin in, I'm not sure what's happened to the car, but Baker drops all the way down the order. As we are just a little bit further up front, we can see Colin Martin going toe-to-toe with DDD Vlamic here, and ahead of them, as the camera pans round, we can see that's Dasunik there battling with Navarro Demova as they come through the third of our chicanes. They come through turns 8 and 9, and you can see Matt Caruana also in the mix. The two winners from the sprint race are now side by side in the run down towards the hairpin, and I think Caruana is just going to come from the inside here, and Debova's not going to defend it too hard. In fact, he goes deep there intentionally to let Caruana get the momentum, and he's hoping Dasunik, of course, just parks in behind, and he does indeed. So a bit of smart play here from Debova and Caruana, both of them knowing that they're not in one another's race, and so they're working to give one another the ability to gain some time and change places. It's worked out very nicely for them. A little bit further up, however, we can see Oystein Herford here. He'll be very wary of the fact, as we do see that's Rhys Young taking a trip across the apex there of what is the turn 14, and a driver falling down the order. We've got a car that's been spun on the apex of 14. That's Arjan Kregel. My goodness, this race has erupted, and we've got drivers falling down the order left, right and centre, and we're not even halfway in. We're not even a quarter of the way, and we're only 4 minutes into this race, and already it has been full of drama, and we're going to try and dissect some of that drama for you very shortly, folks. But whilst it's all happening, Caruana is making another move right now on Rhys Young, and ahead of them we've got Richard Herford, who's just going on the offensive here versus Darren Doherty. Darren Doherty in the white-blue Ferrari, of course, and meanwhile Herford here, our lead pro driver in the BMW M4. He wants to try and get through this as quickly as possible, because he knows Caruana is getting closer and closer, and Caruana has made so many places in the opening 2 laps. He's made 23 places, and that is absolutely staggering, and that shows you the scale of the incident that was occurring on the opening lap here, as we see Darren Doherty going on the offensive here versus Chris Keenan, and that Keenan has been passed him by Doherty. A great move by Darren Doherty. Let's take a look back at that. As we look to our other cameras here, you're going to see Darren Doherty as he comes up the inside of Keenan into the turn 8-9 chicane, and just simply plants it nicely on the brakes and gets it done. The Irishman from Altitude Esports getting everything done in a good order here, as we see them now making their way through turn 11 and up towards 12. You can see Caruana decides to do a little bit of rallycross in order to just come alongside Keenan. I think trying to get the message through to Keenan, look, you're not battling me, we're not in the same class, just let me through, and we'll be forever grateful for one another's presence, as they make their way down towards the chicane, but there's no way through this time around. And meanwhile, further back, we can see Tony Verschaff looking around the outside here, and Navarro Debova. Debova's gone slightly defensive. In fact, he's gone full defensive into the chicane here, and I think he's trying to just give himself some cars between himself and Matt Emmons. Matt Emmons there, who's only a couple of places down in what is P17 overall. That is P10 in the amateur class. We can see here they're both trying to charge up the field, but right now these guys are focusing quite heavily on keeping cars between them as they make their way through turns 1 and 2 once again. And we're now going to try and dissect for you, as we see in the chat here, Big Bacon Gavin, hashtag Baker Red, good luck all of you. Thank you, Big Bacon, we appreciate that in the Facebook chat. And we can also see a Deegan in the YouTube chat saying that you've got a error code. That's very unfortunate, Deegan Fairclough, and we hope to have you next time. Very sorry to hear that, my friend, but hopefully you can enjoy the solace of watching it still. But that is very unfortunate. We did have Fairclough started in our top 10 as we look into the chat as well. Nothing else in the chat so far, but feel free to share your thoughts with everything that's happened. But there's been a lot to talk about, as we see Alexander Batak right now on the attack, we should say, the switchback motorsport driver chasing after what is Billy Fletcher and Chris Keenan, as Rhys Young goes to the runoff there at turn at number 9, and as he rejoins here, Rhys's race is going up the wall right now with regards to its proceedings. He's dropped all the way down to P16, that will P70, that's P10 in the amateur class, and as he now makes his way in towards what is the hairpin here, he's now got I believe that's Pimbo a lap down behind, and Jeremy Dubova, a pro driver as well, behind there on the same lap as Pimbo tries to go around the inside to outside here in the charge down towards the casino straight. And meanwhile, I can tell you that Chris Keenan right now being passed here by Billy Fletcher. We do have both Fletcher and Caruana coming through the field as rapidly as possible here, and after Fletcher getting that slowdown, of course, which cost him the right to win the sprint race or have that fight for the win in the end, you can imagine Fletcher will be wary of the fact that Caruana right now is ahead of him and making haste and trying to get out towards Oystein Hereford, who's trying to put the time between himself and Caruana. As we see Keenan here goes deep, and looks like Dasunik here's going to come through along with Colin Martin. Both of them, of course, pro drivers trying to get past the amateur as they make their way through. Meanwhile, further down the order, we can see Mikkel Andreasen here battling with his fellow amateur driver Arjen Bakker, as they both make their way here through the chicane, the fourth chicane, and now head up towards another lap. As they make their way down, the camera pans around very shortly, and as they come into that heavy braking zone, we can see Andreasen on the inside here, Arjen back on the outside, but Andreasen taking a very tight line there, a bit of an unusual attacking line. He was given a lot of space by Bakker, but he's decided not to utilise it. I think trying to get Bakker to overextend himself into the corner, and it has worked to a degree, although Andreasen not able to get the run up into turn 3, and now he's going to have to settle behind for a period of time. But you can see Arjen Bakker with the damage course, Andreasen, of course, with the repairs to the car after that disastrous start. He's tucked in very close behind here. He's going to look for the move surely. Oh goodness me, and Arjen Bakker squeezing him to the apex there at turn 6, and I think Andreasen had the claim to be alongside, and Arjen Bakker just not giving him the space in order to play with it, and Bakker now drops down the order further as Andreasen continues on there. But I think there's going to be some instance going to the stewards here, as we do see George Bland gradually creeping away from Matthew Addy in the race for the lead right now. And meanwhile, further down, we can see Colin Martin versus Chris Keenan here. Well, Dasunik got past on the previous lap, and now Colin Martin's doing the same on this lap. This lap, of course, being lap number 5 as they come through the chicane, the full chicane, and now head down towards what is the start of lap number 6. And further up front, I can tell you, Billy Fletcher making the pass here on Kurt Van Hoenacker, and Van Hoenacker just simply moving out the way there, not fight it too hard, and place himself right back into the path of Darren Doherty, who he will want to fight, of course, because Darren Doherty is in the amateur class with Van Hoenacker, and he will not want Doherty getting ahead of him. He will not want the Irishman pipping at the challenge by DB Machine there as they make their way out of the first of the chicanes and now head up towards the second of turns 6 and 7 as they go into the Tourisme Montreal board. Now as they make their way through 6 and 7, of course, you can think for Van Hoenacker here it's going to be a bit of a challenge with regards to the fact it's the case Darren Doherty has really come alive in this race as we ride on board from the gearbox here, looking back from Van Hoenacker's car. Doherty's going to look, he's sniffing a move here, he's going to look to the inside, and into the braking zone they go, into the third chicane. Doherty goes very deep and just about squeezes through there, but I think there was some contact, and I think Doherty has had a very poor run through the corner. As the camera pans around, you can see Dasunik has found a way past the pair of them. I think there was a little bit of contact though, and that may have just upset both of the cars as we do. Oh, goodness me, and it looks as though there Van Hoenacker having a bit of a failure of the brakes and just sending Doherty upwards to his side there. That is not pleasant to see, and both drivers now into the pits with damaged cars there, but I definitely think that's going to be one that the stewards will be looking into, because I'm not sure if that was brake failure or something else in its entirety. As meanwhile Matt Emmons battling with Navarro Dubova here, as both of them battling for P11 out on circuit. This is a P5 in the amateur class right now. Emmons on the inside, Navarro on the outside, Chris Keenan tucked in behind as well, but not able to find a way into this fight as they make their way out of the chicane and head down towards turn 1 once again. And you can see Dasunik dropping down the order. He's into the pits already. A lot of drivers have gone into the pits. I think Dasunik may be going in for a scheduled stop here, but meanwhile as they make their way through, 10 minutes of this race gone, and right now we've seen some rather beautiful scenes and we've also seen some rather ugly ones, and we are going to try and bring you back exactly what happened at the start of the race, because that was an absolutely dramatic opener to the race, and we'd like to try and understand what exactly happened. But whilst we're doing so here, we can see Navarro Dubova losing out to Emmons for the time being. I think he will feel in his mind that he can close this down shortly as they make their way through in towards what is turns 6 and 7 and now down towards 8 and 9. Now as they make their way all the way down here, we are just going to take a look back at what happened at the start. So this was right at the start. Now what you're going to see here, this is Alexander Batat. Watch ahead of him how there's a driver who seems to get it very wrong. We've got a car from circuit there, and then everybody concertinas together for a car that's gone for a spin coming through turn at number 2. Now we don't see the car. You see Andreasen caught up on the wall there, and that's what kicked off the major incident behind, as it looks like Andreasen was released, but the driver is up against Jochen Seeger simply got released back onto the path of all the cars. So that was what caused the incident, as we also had a Mercedes in the wall there. We're not sure who that was, but it does seem as though the one car getting it wrong through turn 2, whether it was their mistake or a bit of contact, triggered off a domino effect through turn 2 with cars, and that's what spiked the major incident, which has seen multiple drivers out of proceedings, or at least down at least one lap, if not multiple laps right now, as we are now back with those live pictures. But it does seem as though it was the case that a lot of drivers had nowhere to go, and in the end, when they tried to find some space to go to, they ended up into another car. As meanwhile, Caruana right now, the fastest man out on circuit, he's now hunting down Oosterhuis as they make their way up towards turn 6 and 7. Now I think this is going to be a case, he just got to wait until he gets up to the turn 10 hairpin, and then he'll make the move. Oosterhuis making a bit of a mistake, they're locking up into turn number 6, and this is going to give Caruana a nice clean move up into turn at number 8 and 9 here, and Oosterhuis not going to be able to really fight this one, and I think Caruana's trying to get the message through to him really early here. Look, I'm on your inside, I've got the momentum, just let it go, and staying that far to the right hand side, he is trying to get a major message through. I want this place, you do not need to try and fight for this place anymore, as they make their way through. And Oosterhuis has got Billy Fletcher behind him now, and of course Fletcher will want as easy a pass as Caruana had, because he will be wanting to get close to the back of Caruana as quickly as possible. These two are only separated by a second, but they do of course have the amateur driver between them, who's had a bit of a poor run there out of turn number 10, and now it's going to be the case that Fletcher's not able to capitalise on the slipstream as much as he would like. As meanwhile we can see Kevin van der Silk here has just managed to get his way past Ollie Wayne, who's got Mark Sykes now chasing after him, and then further down we can see Mikael Andreasen battling for P19 overall. That's P10 in the amateur class. He's just made the move here on Reece Young up into turns 8 and 9. But meanwhile, as they make their way through here, it's still the case that Bland and Addy are leading, followed by Øystein Herford in our top 3 overall. And we are hearing that Tony Verschaft has just made his way past Colin Martin, unless I'm very much mistaken here. Just checking my notes. Yes, he's just made the move. Let's take a look at how it happened. So it was a slipstream battle down towards what was the final corners. Of course, turns 13 and 14 into the chicane, and went for Verschaft on the inside, Colin Martin on the outside. A relatively standard pass here, and Martin not fighting this one too hard in terms of trying to put himself through the chicane side by side. I think recognising that there's plenty more racing to go, and the strategy is a key element as they both make their way down towards what is turns 6 and 7. As they come all the way into the corner through at turns 6 and 7, it does look as though pushing as much as they possibly can. As we say hello in the YouTube chat there to Digital Car Culture, we hope you're doing well, good sir. In fact, a fantastic magazine for those who are not aware of it. Digital Car Culture covering multiple esports and also different sim racing titles and more arcadey titles as well. It's worth checking out. But as we can see at Verschaft here trying to break away from Colin Martin, he has got that increasing pressure from what was Colin Martin as they make their way down, and as they come all the way through, it looks as though here Colin Martin just trying to get close and looking stronger in the final sector. And as they come out of there and head all the way down towards turn number 13 and 14, we can see it's the case that as they come roaring through turn at number 12, that Colin Martin losing out in the momentum gain here as they make their way all the way up towards turns 13 and 14. And Colin Martin does have the pace out there, but he just doesn't seem to be able to keep it smooth or keep it together in the dirt yet of a Verschaft car. But again, it's early stakes in this race at the moment, and so anything can happen. I can tell you that Caruana and Fletcher now getting closer to the back of Øystein Herford. Meanwhile, whilst this is going on, in fact, as we look a little bit further up the order, we can see Øystein Herford actually having a bit of a poor run there at turn 2, and as he makes his way up into 3 and 4, he's now got Caruana on the offensive here, chasing after him, really pushing for it right now. They have got traffic up ahead, and they've got Arjan Bakker and P24 a lap down, and Caruana looking very threatening indeed right now. You have to imagine Caruana wants to get this move done because he's got Fletcher all over the back of him, and they will both want to pass Herford. Of course, Herford does not have to let him through. He's in the pro class as well. He will want this win as much as he possibly can. as they make their way down towards turns 8 and 9. Now, I should point out, ladies and gentlemen, I've just had it passed to me off camera, but that with regards to the incident involving, I believe it was Kurt Van Hernacker and Darren Doherty down into turn 10 moments ago. Van Hernacker had a major brake failure into the braking zone there, and he's just had to repair the car. As we look back to what's happening now, and we can see Hereford having to cut onto the inside here of Arjan Baku, who moves out of the way of the blue flags, and Caruana trying to find a way to gain advantage, but no way to do so, as Billy Fletcher right now does make his way past where is Kurt Van Hernacker and Darren Doherty, who are chasing after one another. Darren Doherty and Van Hernacker there just behind. But yes, that incident was a case, it was a complete brake failure on Van Hernacker's car, and that's why it was the case that he just simply tried to stop the car. It did not work. Unfortunately, Doherty was there with him as the Fletcher raising his left-hand side on the sausage curve there of turn number 40. I can imagine some of you may have thought that perhaps he just simply decided not to brake, but no, it wasn't the case. It looked like it because of how severe the attack angle was, but it was the case. Those brakes just completely went on the Porsche, but fortunately both drivers are okay, and now they're going racing for P25 and P26 respectively. You can see them in the rear view camera shot there. But now that we've clarified that, because we were curious as to exactly what happened there, we now look back to Matt Emmons here in P10, who's trying to find his way past Colin Martin. He's got past Navarro de Bova early on, of course. Emmons here in the amateur class versus what is Colin Martin in the pro class. As I'm hearing Caruana has made the pass here on Oistein Hereford at all the places, turn 6 and 7. Let's take a look back at what happened. So coming up into the chicane here, Caruana with a huge overspeed. In fact, Oistein Hereford, they're going on to the runoff area with his two right-hand tyres, and I think that caused the car to unsettle. And in the end, Caruana just simply coming through with so much momentum. He's just on a charge here, is the Briton, as he now looks to Matthew Addy, and he's the leader now of the pro class, but he'll want the overall win as well. And he's got Addy just up the road, and then it's George Bland, 3.2 seconds, as we see Addy goes a little bit wide there. I think for Addy, he just simply wants to be out the way as they make their way through. And I believe we have just seen Darren Doherty here. Well, I think Darren Doherty's gone a bit deep into the hairpin here, and he's now got the presence of what is Oosterhuis behind him, of course, a lap up. As we do take a look back towards our leaders, and we can see that Matthew Addy holding on for the time being. But how long will it be before Caruana finds his way through? And Caruana will want to do so because Oistein Hereford is just behind him, and Billy Fletcher, having had that delayed run past Oosterhuis and also what was Van Hernacker and Doherty, now finds himself down in what is P5, 2 seconds off of Oistein Hereford and Caruana as he comes up into turn number 1 and 2. But meanwhile, looking at further around the circuit, I can tell you a little bit further down, we do have Navarro de Bova, who's just come back at Matt Emmons, and I believe Emmons there with a slow down, running very slowly out to the final corner. So Navarro de Bova just keeping it within the track limits, and instead Emmons having a little bit of a moment where he has not been able to keep it in track limits completely from what we're looking at. So Navarro de Bova up into P5 in the amateur cars and P10 overall, and continuing on that crusade to hunt down the leaders right now. Is he able to do it? That is the big question. As meanwhile, Caruana here finds his way past Matthew Addy for P2 overall. It is the case that our leader of the pro class right now wants to get this move done. He's doing it up into turn 8, into that braking zone, and they have changed places as they make their way through and now head their way down towards turn number 10. And as they roar all the way down, once again, we can see here it's the case that Oistein Hereford's now going to try and do the same versus Addy. And I think it's the case that Addy's going to take that wide line Hereford on the inside here. And as they make their way out, it's the case that the Norwegian has to take a very light touch acceleration out of the corner. And in fact, he loses out initially, but I think he sent his intent through to Addy. Look, I am coming for this place, whether you like it or not, and I'm going to take it off you very shortly, as they make their way up towards turn 13 now. And you can see it's the case that Hereford looking for the move here. And I think this is going to be all said and done unless Hereford gets it wrong under brake. And Addy does keep his nose in there, however, and I think that's upset Hereford a little bit in terms of the stability of the car. And Fletcher gains massively as a result of it. And now Fletcher could be in a prime attacking position here to go on the inside of Hereford into turns 1 and 2, but he's too far back, and then he wasn't able to gain as much momentum as he would have liked. And as a result, now Fletcher tucked in behind the Norwegian here. We do have our 3 leading pros making their way through into P2, P3 and P4 respectively. As we now look a little bit further back, we can see Tony Verschaft, our 4th place pro driver as it currently stands, the Team Racing Netherlands driver here, making his way up in towards turn number 3, and the Switchback Motorsport driver ahead, just simply not able to keep it together through turns 3 and 4. He loses there, but Schaff gets through, and we can also see Darren Doherty finds his way through as well, albeit Darren Doherty is a lap down right now as they make their way through. And further back, you can see Alexander Batak here, the other Switchback Motorsport driver. He will look to try and find his way through very shortly. He's going to come round on the inside here. He'll be on the outside for turn, what is turns 8, oh, sorry, the inside of turn 8, I should really say. And as they make their way up into the braking zone here, I think they're just going to trade places, both as part of the same team. They do not need to hold one another up at this point in the race. And indeed, they have swapped the positions as they now make their way down towards the hairpin. I should point out, by the way, that we have had 5 retirements so far. Deegan Fairclough, Rasmussen, Pinball, also Kevin van der Slick, I should say, and also I believe Arjan Bakker. So we have gone from 32 to 28 drivers remaining. Arjan Kriegel in the pits. They're trying to get that car repaired, but as they proceed down now, our drivers, we're looking at Alexander Patak there. You can see it flashing his lights. They're trying to get into the mind of Darren Doherty to try and say to him, look, you're a lap down, let me through. And as they make their way up into the braking zone for what is turns 13 and 14, Doherty and not responding, as we do see Oosthuizen into the pits there. And I wonder if that's a scheduled stop. 21 minutes in, we could be seeing an early stop. Perhaps he knows he's got a bit of space out on circuit, albeit we will wait and see how that plays out. Meanwhile, much further down the order right now, I'm hearing that Ed Lack has made his way up into P19. He's just past Chris Keenan, but Ed Lack having a very challenging race so far. He was caught up in that major incident coming out of turn 2 on lap number 1. We did see the CXR Project Black Machine caught up in that incident. Indeed, multiple pros have started towards the back, getting caught up in that. That was an absolutely horrific incident. And most of our drivers being able to emerge from it in the end with some damage to the car, damage to their race. But we can see a Lack right now pushing on and lapping at good pace, it should be pointed out. That last lap from Edward Lack, a 36.4. Most of our drivers are in the 37s or the 38s right now. Only our top 3 pros are in the 35s as well. So for Lack, if he can keep this pace up for the majority of the remainder of the race, you could imagine Lack may find himself right up there towards the end, but he's got a long way to go. As we do see there, he's just had Who's come out in front of him, of course, in P18. This is track position. Who's taken that early stop, and I think that may have been a strategic stop, but now Lack will need to find his way for as rapidly as possible, as we do see our championship, a leader in the amateur class here, our leader in the amateur class as well, and overall, George Bland under pressure right now. As I've heard, Mark Baker has jumped to the pits. We'll find out what happened, and Caruana into the pits early here for his scheduled stop, as is Billy Fletcher. So the 2 Luxem 24 drivers deciding to go before the first half of the race is complete. I think they're trying to get themselves some clear space out on track. Perhaps they've identified that they can come out onto turn 2 before the main pack comes through. We will wait and see, of course, but what happened to Mark Baker, who's had to jump to the pits, you ask? Well, here we go. Here is the Ferrari driver making his way, by looks of things, up into turn 10 hairpin, and it looks as though that front right tyre is ready to go. That car is gone. I think what has happened is the front right, he's taken some damage earlier on, and it's just gone. Yep, the car, he's had to park it up and jump it back to the pits. That car was not in a safe state to continue racing, and instead he's decided to abort on the racing for the time being and get it repaired instead with that fast repair, of course, the one that is available to all drivers over the course of the race. But a little bit further back right now, we can tell you that Oosterhuis has been passed by Ed Lack. That was in the run down towards what is turn number 13. And as they come onto that start-finish straight and go on to another lap, going on to their 15th tour of the circuit right now, you can imagine for Oosterhuis, who is in P8 in the amateur class, P17 overall, having made that early pit stop, it should be pointed out, and we believe that was the strategic pit stop. That was not an unscheduled stop. He's now got to find his way up into the fixings in terms of trying to find his way into that battle with the likes of Andreasen, Sykes, and pushing upwards and onwards. But speaking of drivers are pushing onwards right now, we can see it's the case that Matt Caruana has just got past what is Ollie Wayne there for P10 overall. Caruana having a very short pit stop by comparison with Fletcher, who's come all the way out in P20 by comparison. So Caruana having a fast stop and Fletcher getting something wrong in the pits potentially, but he spent an hour, well, not an hour, my apologies, misreading that, 1.5 minutes compared to Caruana's pit, which was essentially 50 seconds. That is a huge... Well, it's the case that Caruana only spent 16 seconds in his box, I should actually point out. Meanwhile, it's the case for Fletcher, a much longer pit stop. I think it was 55 seconds by comparison, and that really does show between the two of them right now. You can see how much the gap has opened up between them as we see that Caruana making his way through the chicane, just missing the World Champions here. He's on course, to try and hunt down that race win. You can imagine in his mind it is all go go, all guns blazing right now, as Fletcher meanwhile onto the back of Ben Hicks here, chasing after the Ignium Motorsport driver, who has made a pit stop, but that was, I think, to repair damage on the car earlier on, as they both come through the hairpin. And now this battle between the two Lamborghini drives, of course, no love lost between them. They have battled previously at the circuit. Great respect shown between the two drives in their earlier encounters, and we expect the same is going to happen here. Now Fletcher has got the toe in the run down towards turns 13 and 14 here, and he's going to come out here to the inside versus Hicks. I do not think Hicks is going to fight this one too much. Fletcher's got the overspeed, onto the brakes he goes, and Hicks just tucks in behind. Fletcher up to P19, meanwhile Hicks down to P20. That was the battle for P10 in the Pro category. Meanwhile, up ahead at the very front of the field, we can see that our leading amateur driver and our race leader, George Bland, the M&V Esports driver, continues to soldier on right now and does not dive into the pit. And neither does Oystein Herford, our lead pro driver, and of course the driver who would love to take the overall lead, even if it's just for a brief while before he makes his pit stop. He would like to be able to take that lead. He looks on the inside here versus Bland. Bland's going to hold to the inside into two, but I think Bland, they're consciously backing out. Nine, there's more at stake here than the pride of being the leader of the race compared to the pros here. Bland, of course, just tucking in and recognising that this is an opportunity to get some major points to hold on to that championship lead in the amateur championship, as he just misses the wall there coming out to turns 2 and 3 and 4, and as he makes his way up in towards 6 and 7 here, you can imagine Bland's goal will be to keep Addy behind him. Addy, of course, Matthew Addy 3.9 seconds back right now, with Tony Verschaft a little bit further down the road, 7.2 seconds, but behind him he's got Matt Emmons, another amateur driver who is a lap down and trying to catch up. And we heard from Emmons between the races, he was saying that it takes a while to get into the rhythm with regards to Lamborghini Huracan. He made that car switch, of course, and we will wait and see how that goes for him over the remainder of the season. As we used to who's here, making the pass on Chris Keenan in the run down towards turn number 1, as they both go on to lap number 17 of their racing. As they come in, you can see Keenan, I think Keenan's got a problem with that car because it is going very, very slowly through turns 1 and 2 right now. And I do think for Keenan, perhaps there's just something that's gone wrong, or perhaps he's nursing an issue on the car, but it's not looking to be a happy place as he makes his way through turns 3 and 4. And you can see, look how slowly he's going there through the chicane. There's definitely something wounded on that BMW, and it is mean that other drivers will catch up rather rapidly indeed. As meanwhile, looking a bit further up the order, we can see Jean-Louis Deschamps here. He's just past Mark Sykes for what is P12. Indeed, Mark Sykes has been passed by a number of drivers, that should be pointed out here, as the NXTGEN Racing driver wearing the Zealous Motorsport livery, of course, for tonight, as he makes his way down all the way towards turn number 10. It's the case that he's in P15. That's P7 in the amateur class, it should be pointed out, so he's putting in a solid performance so far. As we see with Mikael Andreasen, I think, going a bit deep into the hairpin and just letting Ed Lack through there, but that has cost him some time. But he will get the slipstream in the run down the casino straight up towards what is turns 13 and 14. So for Andreasen, simply just letting Ed Lack through has worked to his advantage, one would presume, as he now waits to go on to another lap. And of course, these drivers have yet to pit, the pair of them, although I do say that, in fact, I think they have had a pit stop each. In fact, they both had a pit stop, but that was for the damage earlier, but they've yet to pit for their strategic stop as we understand it. Although it could be the case they may have gone for it very early. We will wait and see. Now, as they make their way through, of course, we look back up to our P4 in the amateur class. He's P7 overall. That's Navarro de Bova, our winner in the sprint, and currently 3.3 seconds off of Colin Martin up the road. But if we take a look within the class itself, that is the big question that you'll be thinking about, of course. We can see here it is the case that right now in our amateur class, de Bova is 9 seconds off of Alexander Batak. And in terms of those lap times, the last time around, Navarro at 37.9, meanwhile Alexander Batak at 39.4. So it is the case right now, de Bova is trying to close down Batak, but he's got a long way to go to do it. Of course, this is unknown territory for Navarro, in the fact that he's not been in a situation where he's had to come from the back of his class in order to make his way towards the front of it. He's not in that reverse grid situation where he has been the one who has been hurt the most by the reverse grid, because he won the amateur category in the sprint race. But now he's getting his first-hand experience of it in this series, and so far putting in a good job. Of course, the major incident on lap number 1 has helped him out considerably. It cannot be forgotten, but still he's putting in the effort as Alexander Batak has come into the pit. So as a result, that will promote de Bova, as we can see Batak right now just parking up in his pit box, and all our drivers coming through. Ollie Wayne also making his way through here. But Batak decided to go at the halfway point here, and we are seeing some rather unique pit stops here today in terms of a lot of drivers deciding to go early. And why I think this is, ladies and gentlemen, is it's because they are noticing where the space on circuit is. They're taking a pit stop to get themselves back out and clear traffic because they do not want to get caught up behind the driver. And you can imagine right now, Jeremy Debova has yet to pit. And meanwhile, Matt Caruana here, they're both battling within the pro category. And you can see Debova here battling hard with Caruana, not letting him come through turns 6 and 7 here. He does not want to give way to the P2 driver in the championship as they make their way through it. And Debova, of course, will want every point possible because he wants to finish in that top 10 in the pro championship before the end of the season as they make their way through turns 8 and 9 here. And I think for the challenge driver right now, it's about just trying to hold on for as long as possible. Caruana, of course, will think about this. He will look for it as we can see Debova making Caruana work all the way to the outside there into the hairpin. Debova is definitely putting Caruana through his paces right now, and you can see behind them they've got Jochen Seeger, who's a lap down in P25, having to watch on in the popcorn seat, as we like to call it, because he's just allowed to watch. He's not able to find his way through, being in that lap down scenario as we ride on board here with Caruana, and he's going to be made to go so tight to the inside by Debova, and Debova's not going to have a comeback to this, surely, as they make their way into the braking zone for the chicane, and you can see Debova going into the pits. So that is why Debova was battling for the position, because he was going to go into the pits and he didn't want to lose all the time in the world. He wanted to take some time out of Caruana instead, and we can see, and meanwhile, a bit further down, I think Ollie Wayne has just had an incident somewhere out on circuit. We're just going to find out for you, ladies and gentlemen. We've had a report that he's been involved in an incident. So this was in the run down towards turn number 10, and behind him, that's Robert Dasudik, the pro driver. Now, is Wayne just going to simply go deep here intentionally into the hairpin to let Dasudik through? He does indeed, so that's why it's counted as an incident, because his car went as slow as that, and as he made his way back onto the racing line there, he continued racing. So false alarm there, folks. Ollie Wayne currently P8 overall. He's P3 in the amateur class right now, and he has yet to pit, as you point out, much like George Van and Matthew Addy. As we see, Navarro Debova has come into pits alongside Jeremy Debova, so the two members of the Debova family both decided to pit at just gone the midway point of the race. We've still got 28 minutes of racing to go as we check in with you guys and girls in the chat. Nothing from you guys and girls at the moment, so that's no problem at all. Feel free to say hi, don't be shy, let us know your thoughts on the racing so far. If you've got any thoughts or input, just let us know who you're cheering on or what's been your favourite moment of the race so far. As we see, meanwhile, talking about moments, Ed Lack right now trying to find his way past Jean-Louis Deschamps. Ed Lack, of course, having to make that very early pit stop after the opening lap. Both of them, in fact, Deschamps as well. And it does look as though the CXR Project Black driver here putting the pressure on Deschamps. But, of course, the Delta Motorsport driver not afraid of some pressure as they make their way into the hairpin here. And you can see the rear picture, Mikael Andreasen in the amateur class now getting ready to get a little bit closer as they both make their way through, and we can see Andreasen here just taking it nice and steady. But meanwhile, Jean-Louis Deschamps, we ride on board the gearbox here of the Porsche driver, and then this long run up the Casino straight towards turns 13 and 14, whilst Lack looks small in the picture, he gets closer and closer, and he peels out for the potential move here into the braking zone. They both go. It's going to be very close as they make their way through, but you can see Deschamps holds on for the time in, but he was definitely disturbed by Lack being there on his inside briefly. And Lack just putting a small move up the inside there to try and disturb Deschamps' flow as they make their way up into turn 1 once again for what is for them now the 21st time of asking, now what can Deschamps do in this situation? Ed Lack seems to be a slightly faster driver here, but Deschamps, we know how strong Deschamps' defensive driving is. We have seen it in the past, and you can see as they make their way through, he's going to make Lack go for a move in one of the nastiest places possible through turns 3 and 4, and Lack looks to the inside, but then realises there is no way through. But of course, by looking for that move, he's cost himself some time, and as they make their way through 5 and up into 6 and 7, Deschamps will buy himself some additional time now in terms of the fact the next overtaking opportunity is really the hairpin at turn 10. Turn 8, if you're overly close, and Deschamps there almost going into the wall out of turn 7, and losing the rear end, and the rear end just not wanting to calm down. I think Deschamps is really driving on the threshold here of what that Porsche is able to do as they make their way through 8 and 9 here. Both drivers on the limit of their capacity as they make their way down towards the hairpin at turn 10 right now. And I do think that it's going to be the case that Deschamps will need to look at potentially nursing those rear tyres, because that rear left in particular continues to slide as much as it's doing. As he goes a bit deep into the braking zone here for the hairpin as they make their way round. You can see Deschamps going for that deep line to get himself the acceleration on the run down out of turn number 12. Onto the Casino straight they go. But look at Lack, he's so close now to Deschamps, and Deschamps is going to give him barely any room until they make their way halfway down. I think Deschamps has realised that he is losing too much time right now as they make their way to the braking zone. go for 13, and it's the case he's going to tuck in behind and try and get Lack to make a mistake into turn 1. I think with the shots he's put up the fight, but in the end it was the case that he was starting to lose time in his race, and I think noticing that Lack just seems to have that advantage for a time being. But never say never, we've still got 25 minutes to go, and he may also be thinking about the long game in terms of if they've both got to make a pit stop, because do remember both of these drivers pitted after the opening lap due to that major collision, so they may still have another stop, a scheduled stop on the strategy card. As meanwhile we look a little bit further up the field and we can see Ollie Wade right now chasing after Dasunik. Remember these two in different categories, Wade in the amateur class, the MV Esports driver, Dasunik just ahead in the pro class, and for Wade right now, well, I think he's just got to keep putting in these laps as best he possibly can and focus on keeping it together for the time being. And speaking of one driver right now who'll be looking to keep it together, Billy Fletcher, after what was a very long pit stop, he finds himself in P17 overall. That's P9 in the pro class, and his next target will be Oosterhuis here as they make their way through 5 and up into 6 and 7. Oosterhuis going a little bit defensive there offline, and Fletcher will be waiting for the opportunity. I'm sure Fletcher right now will be thinking there's no need to fire Oosterhuis, just let me through it. Look how close he is to the back of the Switchback Motorsport machine as the Luxem 24 driver now looks to the inside here up into turn 8. He's going to push it on the inside here into 8. He's going to make his claim to the position, and in the end Oosterhuis backs off, noticing there is no way to come back at that one. Fletcher now up into P16, and meanwhile we look a little bit further down the order and we can see Jochen here down in P24, lap down on our leaders right now, having got the car repaired. The BMW Motorrad driver having a nightmare day at Montreal, and it's not a race to remember, or a pair of races to remember, but of course he does love to bounce back, and I can imagine that Sigurd right now will be just focusing on everything he can to salvage some form of result. P13 in the amateur class, P24 overall. His target is Kurt Van Horenacker, who's 2.2 seconds up the road right now, but there is a long way to go still for these guys. They've still got just over 20 minutes to go. Anything can happen, and we will wait and see how it all plays out as Mark Sykes is into the pits from what was at the time P13. And this is for his scheduled stop, we believe, as he comes to that standstill very shortly. But meanwhile, from one driver who's gone into the pits to a driver who still has yet to come into the pits, we can see Øystein Herford here, the Norwegian, continuing to soldier around the circuit right now. And I think what the Norwegian is trying to do here, folks, he's trying to go as long as possible. He's trying to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. So most pit stops we have seen so far have been either just before or at the halfway point, and as we see George Bland coming into the pits, and he's our leader in the amateur category, which means now Matthew Addy returns to the lead of the amateur category for the time being. And as they make their way through here, I think what Bland has done, he's gone a little bit later on because he's tried to buy himself some time. And meanwhile, what Hereford's going to try and do, he's going to try and go as long as humanly possible for the simple reason he wants to get as much time on the circuit before he comes up behind a huge traffic jam. He has yet to face a major traffic jam, and the one driver he'll be concerned about, of course, is Matt Caruana, who does seem to have found himself some clear space out of the circuit right now. He is 17 seconds down on Tony Verschaft. And remember that the gap between Caruana and Hereford is effectively right now, with a little bit of mental mass, about 31 seconds. So what Hereford is investing in is that there will be a time when he can pit when he feels that Caruana has got himself caught up behind enough traffic that Hereford can regain the lead, but we will wait and see whether that approach does work. Now, other drivers who have pitted, of course, we see Jeremy De Bover here coming up against Oosterhuis here down into P13 as they cut into turn 13, I should say. This is the battle for P16, and it's the case De Bover makes his way through there. Oosterhuis not fighting, of course, with the pro driver coming through versus the AM driver as they make their way up in towards turn number 1. They go into lap number 24. But meanwhile, further up the road here, we can see Tony Verschaft getting ever closer to the back of Matthew Addy. Of course, these two in different classes. Verschaft in the pro category, Addy in the amateur category. Now, how will Addy respond to this? Will he fight it, or will he simply let it go? Well, he goes into the pits. Oh, goodness me. And Addy breaking very early for the pits there, and Verschaft getting caught out by that. A number of drivers have simply charged into the pits. I think Addy cautious of his pit entry and may not know where the pit limiter line is compared to some of the other drivers here, but Verschaft did well to react to that, and as a result now that may have cost the pair of them a little bit of time as Caruana comes crashing through turns 13 and 14 there over the sausage curves. He will take P2 now as Øystein Herford is coming out of the pits here, and we can see Herford making his way out. He'll be getting up to speed very shortly, but I think Caruana, as he makes his way through turn 1, will have taken the lead back, and Caruana has timed his pit stop, and as a result Herford has just come out of the pit lane, out of turn 2, and the gap between the two of them 3.4 seconds. That that is the deficit. That was about the gap when Caruana came into the pits, if not a little bit less than that when they came into the pits. But in the end, it has not worked out for Hereford. But what it has done for Øystein Hereford, it should be pointed out, is that it has bought him some clear space on circuit, and the Norwegian will be happy with this. For the simple reason, he may not be able to take the win versus Caruana, but what he will be able to do is give himself some good space to hold on to that P2. Dasunik, meanwhile, is 11.7 seconds down in P3 right now, and that is Hereford's main rival, with Dasunik having pitted as well. And the one driver who's fallen out of all of this is Billy Fletcher, of course, who was ahead of Hereford, or making his way to get past Hereford before he had his pit stop, and it was such a long pit stop he dropped all the way down to P11, and that's a disaster, of course, for Billy Fletcher right now, because he's got to try and find his way through. This is P7, of course, in the pro category that Fletcher's in currently, but this has not been his race tonight, as we can see Edward Lack, meanwhile, continuing this crusade through the field right now. He's in that P7 position, he's looking at Matthew Addy next, and this is overall places. And as he makes his way up into the hairpin right now, we can see that Matthew Addy going a little bit deep there. In fact, locking up the rears. I don't know if you saw that, folks. He just simply seemed to slide on the rear end. And as a result, Lack now, just trying to find a way through here at the least path possible. He wants the least path of resistance versus Addy. Of course, Addy in his own race here, but conscious of the fact he won't want to let too many people through in the pro category, because he'll feel that he's got his own pace to contend with as they make their way up into turn 13. But Lack making it very clear he wants to place off of Addy, and he takes it. And Addy does not offer too much of resistance here as they make their way through. Addy, of course, chased after George Bland, who we can see just a bit further up the road there. George Bland at the head of the picture. Meanwhile, we can see Addy at the rear of the picture right now, as they, well, in fact, the reverse way around, as they make their way through turns 1 and 2 once again here. And Addy, to give you an idea, Matthew Addy right now, that last lap, well, that was his pit exit lap, it should be pointed out, so we can't really compare laps at the moment. We'll do a comparison next time around, and we'll let you know the difference between our two lead contenders in the amateur class, as we do see Alexander Batak, meanwhile, he's passed Mikko Andreasen, who's come into the pits, and it's the case the Switchback Motorsport driver Alexander Batak, P9 overall, P3 in the amateur class currently, as he makes his way out of turn number 2. And as we look back to our chat here from Digital Car Culture, the commentary is awesome, mates. I'm cheering you on. Really appreciate that, DCC. And I'm very grateful to the compliment, of course. And as now we look back to Batak making his way through what is turns 5 and up into 6 and 7 here. What can Batak get from this? He's in P3. He's put in a good performance so far. He's taken his pit stop. Can he chase down Addy? Well, the gap between himself and Matthew Addy is, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, 18 seconds. That is a long distance to overhaul in just over 15 minutes of racing. I think for Batak it's going to be more about focusing on just finishing where he currently is. And meanwhile, speaking about another driver who may be thinking the same, Navarro Dabova right now, currently P13 overall, that's P4 in the amateur class, and I think he is now starting to come up against the brick wall in terms of trying to close down the top 3 in the amateur category, as we have heard that Matt Emmons has jumped to the pits. What has happened to the Lamborghini Huracan driver? Turn 1, he went high on the curb there, and as he made his way through, we're going to see the rear end snap loose on him as he makes his way out. He's gone a little bit too early on the throttle and into the wall there, hitting the front end. That's going to do damage to the front suspension and the aero, but unlikely to the engine, given the fact it's mid-engine rear-wheel drive, the Huracan. But we will wait and see, as we've also heard that Arjan Kregor has just jumped to the pit. Now, what has happened to Arjan? So this was moments ago, and he was down in the bottom half of the field as he was coming up into turn 8. He's gone deep on the brakes, done a rally cross across the apex of turn 9, and Reece, oh goodness me, and Reece Young there, who I think had got it caught on the brakes coming through there. Arjan Kregel simply spearing into the side of Reece Young, and I think for Kregel there was nowhere he could go, and Reece Young just an innocent bystander in that. That's very unfortunate for Young and for Kregel. I think that's going to be one of those moments where he's going to probably be hopping to Young's garage shortly after the race to apologise for that one. But meanwhile, as we continue to look around the field has spaced out quite a bit. This race has been a race of attrition, I should tell you, ladies and gentlemen. It really has seen a lot of drivers fall. We have, with a starting grid of 32, we lost Egan Fairclough due to technical issues, unfortunately. He has had a couple of technical issues in the past. Those technical issues keep reoccurring, so we lost him at the start. It's Gamble Rasmussen we lost, Pimbal Kevin van der Slick. We also lost Arjan Bakker, Mark Baker, and I think we've also lost Arjan Kregel, unless I am mistaken. Yes, we have lost Kregel, so it's the case our Rishung is the last of our runners, our 25th and last runner, currently doing repair work on the car. But otherwise, a good number of drivers have now spaced out to a degree. Although I say that, Jochen Seeger is now going to give us a little bit of battling action as he chases after Mark Sykes as they come through turn number 10 here through the hairpin, and they'll make their way down towards turn number 13. But before they do, of course, they've got to go through the right-hand kink of number 12 to make their way onto the Casino Straight. And as they do, we can see here it's the case that Seeger not able to close up to Sykes. Of course, we do know that the Huracan being the faster car on the straights, as Sykes gets it very wrong there, and Seeger has to make a quick evasive move to the inside. They're coming out at 14. And Sykes just too high on the apex curve there at 14, and it's an easy mistake to make when you're driving at such a ferocious pace. And also the tiredness will be kicking in for some of our drivers right now, and as a result it is the case that Seeger moves up to P22, that's P11 in the amateur class. But meanwhile, further up the road, I can tell you that Billy Fletcher puts in the pressure on Alexander Batak right now. He's trying to salvage the points out of this race. Fletcher, he needs every point he can get, and he's going to go around the outside of Batak down into turn number 8. I think Batak lifting off a little bit there, simply letting Fletcher through as Fletcher's up into P8 overall. That doesn't change his place, of course, in the pro class. He's currently P6 in the pros, hunting down Colin Martin, who is 4.3 seconds up the road from him. Speaking of Colin Martin, here is the NXTGEN Racing driver, the pro driver, who's having a good run in this race. He's had quite a string of bad luck, I must admit, since the opening half of the season. Things not seem to have worked out for the Briton, but he's finally putting it back together right now, and this could end up being one of his better performances. Looking currently at a P5 in the pro class, P7 overall in this feature race. We will wait to see. Of course, Colin Martin does love to dig deep, and sometimes he's had to dig deeper than most to find those results, and it does also seem as though bad luck follows him where he goes in this series, and some drivers do end up with that. As meanwhile, speaking about drivers making moves, we've got Edward Lack going up against Navarro Debova here, the AM on the outside, the pro on the inside here in the run up towards 13, and Lack being allowed through by Navarro here, not making a major fuss out of it. Debova, for the simple reason, not in the same class, there's no need to, as they both make their way through, and it's the case Debova not losing too much time. Instead, he gets a little bit of slipstream there in the run down towards turn 1. Both drivers going on to lap number 29. Still what is 13 minutes to go here as they come through turns 1 and 2 through Senna Virage, as they now make their way up towards turn 3. Meanwhile, up front, I can tell you right now that is the case that Matt Caruana hold on to this lead. As we see at the bottom of your picture there, that was Austin Hereford who's chasing after him. It is the case that last lap from Caruana at 35.92, Austin Hereford at 36.25. Hereford just losing a couple attempts a lap right now. The Norwegian is giving everything he can to chase down that lead, but he just does not seem to have an answer to Caruana's pace. We will wait and see, of course. We never know what could happen towards the end here. But you can imagine the number 73 driver would love to take to that top step. He's been pushing so hard to be on that podium, if not the top step, since his entry into this series right now. And it is only just shy of 4 seconds that separates him from Caruana, and how he would love to take that back. We will have to wait and see, of course, if he's able to do it. But meanwhile, a little bit further down the order, I have recently heard that Darren Doherty has made the pass on Chris Keenan for P19, and that would be in P8 in the amateur class. Let's see how it happened. So in the run out of what appears to be turns 6 and 7 here, Keenan staying on the outside line, and Doherty, I think it was the case Keenan probably had a poor run out of the corner there, because it looked as though Keenan was much slower, and that BMW has been in a pretty poor state, we've heard, since earlier on, and Altitude Esports driver Doherty makes his way, through and up a position. As they make their way through turns 3 and 4, once again, you can see Doherty running away from Keenan. I do think Keenan's nursing a problem in that BMW, because it just does not look as though it can get the traction down out the corners. There seems to be something that is hurting that car. Albeit Keenan running in P9 in the AM class right now, P20 overall, putting a good performance here, and he's got a gap of 20 seconds to Kurt Van Hoornacker in P21. Van Hoornacker currently running on 37s versus Keenan on 39s. We will wait and see, but Keenan losing 2 seconds a lap to the drivers around him right now, but he's got enough time to hold on. He's only got approximately 10 more laps of the circuit to go as he makes his way down towards the hairpin. Less than that, in fact, probably about 8 to 9. But meanwhile, looking a little bit further up, we can see we have got the two Dutch drivers here of De Soenick and also Verschaff as they make their way down towards 13 into the final chicane once again. De Soenick into the pits here for a second stop. So this is a bit of a surprise here, but we could see more of these from some of our drivers who were caught up in the major instance earlier on. But that does mean that Verschaff now moves back up into P3 overall and in the Pro category, which he'll be very happy with. George Bland versus Matthew Addy. You can see Bland right now leading the two of them. This is for the lead of the amateur class. Bland leading by 3.8 seconds over Matthew Addy. In terms of lap times, as we look at Addy right now, that last time around, Bland a 37.1, Addy a 37.3. It does seem as though Bland has the advantage in terms of lap pace by about 1 to 2 tenths a lap versus Addy, but we will wait and see how it plays out, of course, because whilst that may be an advantage now, the tyres can go off towards the end, particularly if one driver decided not to change tyres in the pits and the other driver did, or alternatively one driver is better at nursing their tyres than the other. But you can see that these two right now are exchanging lap times, and Addy will use the fact he can see Bland as motivation, but I do wonder how long it'll be, because it does look as though Addy is losing out in the long haul here. As meanwhile, a bit further down, we do have Ollie Wayne here chasing after Navarro de Boven, and I think de Boven has had an incident as Wayne gets very close to the back of Navarro here, and I think something has gone wrong for Navarro as they make their way through turn 5 and head down towards turns 6 and 7. We'll take a look back at that very shortly as Wayne looks at a move here. Navarro just simply gives him the space on the inside as Caruana sets the fastest lap of the race at 35.1. More on that in a second, but meanwhile, Wayne trying to find his way through, and Navarro there, I think there's damage on that Porsche because you can see Jochen Siegert coming through. He's a lap down, but Navarro really struggling, and Jean-Louis Deschamps now going to squeeze his way through as well. And let's take a look back at what happened to Navarro de Boven. So this was earlier on in the run down towards turns 1 and 2. Now, does de Boven get it wrong into 1? In fact, he's gone very deep and he's taken to the runoff here. Now, has he hit a wall? Well, he's bounced across the curb, but it doesn't look as though anything's gone wrong with the car. And I think it is the case that de Boven just simply unsettled by that, because then we saw the rest of the sequence and it just looks as though de Boven needs to get it back together. But we've heard he's had another incident just now. In fact, he's just gone very deep into the hairpin. That's why we've had it come up on our time screens. He's let Deschamps through. So I think de Boven's just had a little bit of a knock to his confidence there with that one mistake. And perhaps it's the case tiredness is kicking in, and perhaps he's thinking about backing it off a little bit, because right now if he was to finish where he is, that's still P5 in the AM class in this race, and that would mean he's picked up a win and a P5 today, which would be a brilliant pair of results as we see Jochen Siegert moving out of the way, respecting the blue flags. But he has now got Mark Sykes behind him, and I do believe Mark Sykes is on the same lap as him, and he will not want to let the Englishman through, or the German, as they make their way through turn 2 and up into 3 and 4 once again. Now, I can tell you we have had Colin Martin recently come into the pit, and he's about to emerge from the pit. Well, no, he's not about to emerge. He's still in his box right now. He will be emerging soon, one would hope. But meanwhile, Mark Sykes right now on the offensive here versus Jochen Siegert. In fact, he's gone for the move, and Siegert, they're backing off completely. I'm wondering if there's a problem with the German's car, because Sykes has just come through, and now he's a lap down, of course, in Navarro de Boven here. But as they make their way through, you can imagine Sykes is now getting a little bit racy, although it is the case that he does have drivers on the lead lap ahead and behind him, and how is he going to manage that situation? That will be the big question in his mind, as Colin Martin has come out of the pit in P18 overall. That is P11 in the Pro category. But as our drivers now make their way down in towards the hairpin once again here, you can see Sykes letting what is there Andreasen through, but he's not letting Siegert through. And I think Siegert was backing off there to simply let Andreasen through and trying to catch up to the back of Sykes, knowing that Sykes would have to let the lead lap drive through. And you can see as a result, this is what Siegert was waiting for, to have the run down into 13 and 14 as they come roaring down here. It's Huracan versus BMW, and just ahead of them we've got Mikel Andreasen battling with Navarro de Boven, and Andreasen on the inside in the Audi here gets the move done, as Siegert also gets the move done on Sykes here. So 2 moves up into the final chicane there. All drivers missing the World Champions, of course, and it is the case now with 6.5 minutes to go. We've got a battle for what is P14 overall, and we've got a battle for what is P22 overall as they make their way through turns 1 and 2 once again here. Now, as they make their way through these courses, we see Navarro that goes wide out of turn 2, and I definitely think something is wrong with that Porsche right now, because he just does not seem to be settled through the corners anymore. I think it may have been that hit over the bump that's damaged some of the front suspension as they come through the chicanes here, and Navarro really struggling to keep things together right now as they make their way through. And meanwhile, further up the road, I can tell you that now it's the case that the senior member of the Debova family is under attack from Ed Lack, as Lack looks to try and make the move for P10 overall. This is of course for P7 out of the circuit in the Pro class, and as they make their way down into their hairpin, you can see Jeremy Debova going very deep there to block Lack, but Lack goes for the cutback here. He throws it to the inside line here, a very smart move, and that's a drag race down towards turn 13. If there's one thing the Huracan can do, it is the top speed game as they make their way through turn 12. It's side by side in the run up towards the chicane. Lack on the inside, Debova on the outside here. They make their way into the braking zone. Surely Lack's got this one. No, Debova looks to come around the outside to inside here, and both drivers, as Debova just gets a little too high on the apex curve of 14, both giving one another plenty of racing room, but in the end Debova just could not keep the car straight coming out of 14, just a little too high on the curb, and as a result we now do have Lack who's gained the place as they make their way through the left into right combination. 5 minutes remaining in this race as we do have more drivers continue to push as much as possible right now, and as they come through once again, we can see Debova just trying to find a way to come back after Lack. But I think for Debova right now, he's got Van Hoenacker who's a lap down trying to unlap himself. I think it may be the case that he needs to settle for the P8 right now, because it will still be good points on the board for Debova, but it's not perhaps the points he will have wanted today. He's got Jean-Louis Deschamps who's quite a way back, as we hear Navarro Debova has come out of the pit, so there was a stop for the younger member of the Debova family. That's going to put him even further down the order right now as he makes his way out the pits here. And we've got Oosterhuis who has just come across the timeline. So Navarro actually has not lost out too much. He's lost 1 place to Mikel Andres, and he's dropped down to P6 in the Amp class. And Oosterhuis will now see Navarro Debova just ahead of him, only 6 tenths up the road, and he will want to hunt it down with a fever as they make their way through the turns at 3 and 4 chicane here. And it's the case of Oosterhuis. Can he close down Navarro Debova, or will he be able to hold on? That'll be the big question. As meanwhile up front, I can tell you that it's Caruana who has been putting lap after lap in the 35s. His best lap early on was a 35.1. Now it's been a 35.4 he's just put in, and Caruana is flying right now, and Oystein Hereford is lapping almost 2 seconds a lap slower. He has got some traffic, to be fair, but on average it's about 1 second a lap slower, and that is how the gap has opened up. And it is the case for Caruana right now. He's just simply in a world of his own. And speaking of drivers who'd love to get back into being in the world of Caruana and trying to get into the mix, Billy Fletcher, who's P4 in the Pro category right now, the Luxem 24 driver, he's 6 seconds down on Matthew Addy in P5, but he's a long way down in the top 3 in the pros, and I think P4 is the highest he's going to attain today in the Pro class for Billy Fletcher, and this is definitely, I think, going to tip the scales in terms of the Pro Championship. I think Caruana may take the lead, if not be almost level on points with Fletcher come the end of the races tonight. Of course, subject to any stewards inquiries. I'm not sure there's going to be any against them, as we do see a Lack here. Now, Edward Lack has, well, I believe, as he makes his way through there, he's just gone past the back marker of Keenan. We're looking at timers, and he's only got a 1.6 second gap to Dasunik ahead of him. That's Robert Dasunik just up the road, and Lack will be chasing that now. His last lap of 36.0, Dasunik a 37.3. This could happen for Lack. He could take on Dasunik come the final lap. He is closing that gap down at a rapid rate or not. Will he be able to? That is the big question. He's not got far to go right now, and you can imagine with the fact that we're coming, well, the time these guys cross that timing line, it'll be about 2 minutes to go, 1.5 minutes to go. They will have 1 more lap after this. They are also on the lead lap, and we can tell you that Matt Caruana right now is halfway round the lap. So after the one they go on to, I think there's going to be 2 laps remaining for Lack and also Dasunik to contest what is P9 overall, but that is effectively P6 in the Pro category. Can Lack close it down? That is the big question, as meanwhile Navarro Debova here, he's chasing after Colin Martin. Colin Martin, of course, in the Pro category versus Debova in the Amateur category, as they make their way up into left hand, and that's Matthew Addy behind on the lead lap, and he will not want to be held up by this for too long, as George Bland has also found his way through here as the drivers make their way up in towards turn 8. And as they come charging through up in towards the third chicane here, here's the case that Navarro just looking at one eye forward, one eye back, I think, as he goes a little bit deep for 8 into 9. And I definitely think it might be a bit of tiredness creeping in right now as he just tries to keep it together. As Ollie Wayne, meanwhile, has just made a pass on Jimmy Duchan's here as they make their way up into 3 and 4. I think Duchan's just simply having a bit of a poor run out of 2. As meanwhile, the battle, which is really starting to build up, as we just heard that Chris Keenan has been passed by Kurt Van Hohenacker for what is P20 overall. Here is Edward Latt, and he is chasing down what is Robert de Sunic here for P9 overall. This is P6 in the pro category. We have got one more lap after this one. Our race leader has gone on to the final lap already, and you can see Lack doing everything he can to hunt this one down, as we note there that de Sunic really struggling for rotation through the hairpin there. He just could not get the car to turn 3, went a bit deep, and the rear just would not come around. And this could be an opportunity for Lack. He's been waiting for it. He's going to build up all the speed here, and up in towards turn 13 they come. It's Lack on the outside, meanwhile it's de Sunic on the inside. De Sunic defends hard. Lack gets his nose ahead. They're going to be side by side in the run up through the chicane here, but it is the case that both drivers come through. They both make it clear of the wall, and as they come onto the final lap right now, Lack will have the measure. Will he be able to get it? However, will he be able to take the place? That is the big question outstanding as he makes his way through the sequence of corners here and returns 1 and 2. But meanwhile, whilst they're making their way through those corners, I can tell you that one driver who's coming through to take the win on the final lap, on his 37th lap, he has charged through the field. He's benefited from the instance at the start, but no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, he has led this one to the end. It's Matt Caruana who takes the win overall in the feature race at Montreal and takes the win in the pro class. 2 wins back to back tonight, a brilliant result. Oystein Herford in the end will come home in a brilliant P2. He'll be very happy with that, the Norwegian. A brilliant drive from Herford as he comes across the line. And then it is Tony Verschaft who is going to make his way from Team Racing Netherlands, the Dutchman. He will be coming home in P3 in the pro class and overall as well in the feature race. A good drive from Verschaft as well as he comes that time in line and he makes his way through. And then behind him, it is going to be George Bland, who is going to take P4 and in the end hold on to the win in the amateur class. A brilliant drive from George Bland, making up for the disaster of the sprint race. And Matthew Addy, P2 there in the amateur class. We see Billy Fletcher in the end in what was P6 overall. That's P4 in the pro category. Alexander Patak is going to take third. He's going to take the third step of the podium for the amateur class. P7 overall. A great drive from the Dane. And then it's going to be Deirdre de Verleemink who comes home in P8. That is P5 in the pro category as he crosses the line. And then Edward Lackinian made it past Robert de Sunic. He comes home in P9. That's P6 in, well no, my apologies, that is P7 according to our timing screens right now. I think we've got a bit of a glitch on our time screen. I think it is P6 in the pro category. De Sunic finished behind him in P10. That is P7 in the pros. And then Jeremy DeBova here in P11 picking up a P8 in the pro category. Ollie Wayne in P12 overall. That's P4 in the AM category. And it's Mikkel Andreasen just behind him in the end, not able to close up enough. That's P13 overall, P5 in the AM category. And those were all of our drivers who finished on the lead lap. Ben Hicks and was Morten Oosterhuis completing our top 15. A brilliant race, albeit a rather catastrophic race for a number of our drivers at the start. But what we can see is they all make their way home right now. And I believe Chris Keenan is the last driver to finish their race as he makes his way through a huge rate of attrition in this one. But one driver who I can imagine will be smiling from ear to ear with Matt Caruana right now, because this means that into the final 2 rounds he is right there in the hunt for that championship win in the pro category, right alongside Billy Fletcher now. And meanwhile for Bland, well, he couldn't have asked a better way to redeem what was a disastrous sprint race by bringing home the win in the amateur class there in the feature. And this is going to be critical for him. He needs every point to keep that gap at the top of the amateur championship alive. Behind him, Matthew Addy, another very strong performance from Addy. The 570 driver digging deep to find this one. Not able to take the fight to Bland in the end, but still a P2 in the feature race. He'll be very happy with that indeed. But don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We'll very shortly be bringing you our post-race interviews with our winners of the feature race in both categories. But until then, stay seated because you won't want to miss what they've got to say as we see all of our drivers now making their way down towards the pits here. It's been a very challenging race for many of our drivers here as they all come in now. I think unless I'm very much mistaken, they're pushing Billy Fletcher across the ways towards the pit lane. I think Fletcher's run out of fuel here. They're trying to push him along. A little bit of a conga line there forming as they make their way into the pit. But we'll get ready for those post-race interviews, ladies and gentlemen. Alrighty folks, well without further ado we get ready for our post-race interviews with our winners of the feature race, and we're going to start off with our pro winner, and that was Matt Caruana in the number 79 car. Just before we do, we check in with the chat there, and we can see Zeronic saying hello in the Twitch chat. Hello to you, Zeronic. And Katie Eames saying congrats to Caruana and George Bland. Super drives. Indeed, fantastic drives from both our drivers. And let's find out from our winner in the pro category what he's got to say about what was a very eventful race. Hello, Matt. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Matt, another win. Congratulations on the win in the feature race, but a very dramatic opener, which I think you benefited from considerably. How do you feel about the win?
That was a really good race, that one. I didn't expect to get off as quickly as I did, but at the start there was lots of crashes, and I managed to squeeze through a tiny gap right at the start, and it really helped me get up to the front. And then it was just trying to do damage limitation and try and get to the front.
So in making your way to the front, obviously going into the race you would have thought about trying to come through the field as rapidly as possible, but when you gained a large number of places at the start, I think when we checked back you'd gained something along the region of 20, it was almost 23 places in the opening 2 laps. Did you change your strategy at all because of that?
I sort of, I thought that, well, after I had the damage, I was just trying to stay with the pack and trying to stay in the slipstream after that and get up to the front, and then pit as early as possible to get the damage fixed.
So with regards to damage, we didn't quite see what happened. Would you mind elaborating on the damage you picked up?
It was at the second chicane, I think, and there was a big crash there, and I couldn't see, so there was people on the grass next to me, and someone came back on and collected me, I think, and I got a bit of front end damage.
I see, because we saw you coming through the field. It was almost as if there wasn't damage to the car. You could convince us otherwise with your lap times, but still, that's very intriguing. And having repaired the damage, then you seem to come out in clear air, albeit you're very quickly making your way through the field and then charging after Øystein Hereford until he pitted. Was the aim at that point with regards to damage limitation just to put in qualifying lap after qualifying lap? You were going monstrously fast towards the end.
At the end, I was just trying to look out for traffic and try and keep it out of the wall and not let Øystein close up to me too much, and just try and keep it consistent to the end.
It definitely showed an absolutely brilliant performance, and I believe what was the fastest lap of the race, unless I'm mistaken, that 35.1.
I think Billy took it off me right at the end.
Indeed, he did actually, a 35.0 to Billy, taking those valuable 5 points.
Yeah, maybe fair enough then. That was a good lap.
But looking forward now, having picked up another solid score of points today, looking forward to round 11 in a week's time, the Nürburgring World Endurance Circuit. How are you feeling for the German tarmac?
A bit worried, to be honest. It's not my best track, but I'm going to see what I can do.
We do look forward to you taking to the circuit in Germany, but until then, congratulations on the 2 wins tonight. Well done once again, and we look forward to seeing you in a week's time.
Thank you.
Caruana there, very happy with his performance indeed. I think after putting in what was a Herculean performance all the way from the back to the front and in the end taking home the win, you can imagine that in his mind right now, he's probably just going to want to rest and get himself set for what he expects will be a difficult race at Nürburgring the Nürburgring World Endurance Circuit, not the GP circuit. But we go from our pro winner to our amateur winner right now, and that is George Bland. Hello, George. Can you hear me?
Hi, Paul. I can.
Difficult opening race, but you seem to have completely turned it around in the feature race. How does it feel to have taken the win in the feature?
Oh, yeah, it's nice to have the win. I had an absolute nightmare in the sprint race. Spun the wheels up too early, and it just wiped out a couple of the cars with me, which is a shame. But yeah, no, glad I recovered from it. Took a win.
And breaking it down, it seemed as though at the start you were going guns blazing to try and take the to take the lead as early as possible and then make the breakaway. Was that because you had Matthew Addy near you, or was it just a thought in your mind that you wanted that lead position?
Bit of both. I knew Matt was going to keep me honest the whole way, but I just tried to get that bit of a break the toe, and just try and manage it from there, which fortunately I managed to do.
Now, given the fact that this race had a very high instant rate in the feature, particularly on that opening lap, albeit it probably was all in your rearview mirror in terms of what happened, did that change your strategy at all in terms of deciding when to pick? 'Cause we saw a lot of drivers go early on, and some drivers going unexpectedly sort of the midpoint. I think yourself, you just went after the midpoint. Did you change your strategy, or was it always in your plan to pit when you did?
To be honest, I was expecting to pit early with damage, but I was quite surprised I got to the halfway mark. Time seemed to fly, and I had no damage, so I thought, right, I'll see how long I can push this tank of fuel. Went as far as I could before I pitted to give myself a quick splash and dash at the end.
I see. And then towards the end, we did see that Addy seemed to be matching you for pace, but every so often you just eke out 2 or 3 attempts. Were you managing the pace, or was it literally 100% all the way in the end?
A bit of both. There's a few times where I'd gained a bit of an advantage over Matt, and then I'd overheated my tyres, so I had to back off, and so on. I think me and Matt were both in that cycle together. But yeah, a lot of it was just trying to manage the gap to Matt.
Well, it definitely showed, because you two were exchanging lap times as if it was on Wall Street, in all honesty. It was trading left, right and centre, and it was brilliant to see. But with that in mind, and now another great points haul to your tally, 2 rounds to go. We head to Nürburgring World Endurance Circuit in a week's time. How are you feeling for the German circuit?
I'm a lot happier than this week, put it that way. It's not a track I've actually done much racing on, but I do actually quite like the circuit, so I think I should be a bit more comfortable there than I was this week.
And with you essentially maintaining that lead in the championship in the amateur class at the moment, what are your thoughts in terms of 2 rounds to go? Do you feel as though you're getting to that point it's all wrapped up, or is it still on your toes all the way to the end?
Oh no, it's definitely not wrapped up. We all know what can happen. Yeah, I think it's just be a case of try and keep my edge as much as possible, try and stretch it, because who knows what could happen with mistakes like what I made in the sprint race. It can happen anytime.
Well, with that, congratulations on the win once again, and we look forward to seeing you in a week's time take to Nürburgring.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Well, Bland there, very happy, of course, with his return to top of the form with regards to the feature race after what was a disastrous, and in his own words, one of those races we're not proud of with regards to the sprint race, but he was able to turn it around. That's sometimes what happens. You have a poor opening race, you have to turn it around in the feature, and George dug very deep there to do so. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. That is the conclusion of our racing for tonight. If you do want to know more about the Next Gen Racing community, the series we put on, or just about us in general, why not check us out at our Next Gen Racing website. That's nextgenracing.co.uk. Alternatively, a Next Gen Racing Facebook group. Our Facebook group, of course, is facebook.com/groups/Next Gen Racing. You can find out more about the series, and if you do want to take part in the series, you can always ask the admins how you may get involved. Also, I'd like to say a big thank you to our partners, that's Apex Racing Academy and Next Level Racing, without whom it would not be possible to bring this series. And as we look forward to a week's time, we head to the Nürburgring, a World Endurance Circuit. We're not doing the full 24-hour circuit as I've come to understand it, but it is just the mainstay circuit, the World Endurance Circuit, and that will be on a Wednesday, the 6th of October, 2021. Put it in the diary, folks. It'll be the penultimate round. It'll be the last round where we have a sprint and a feature race, because in round 12, of course, we have the 2-hour special. And as we look to the reference that as provided to us by Matt Emmons here, as he makes his way out of the final corner of the German circuit and heads his way across that timeline to start it. This circuit is going to be one that invites a lot more overtaking. We expect to see a lot more battling into each and every corner at the Nürburgring GP circuit. Not to say, well, World Endurance Circuit, I'll get GP out of my mind soon. It's not to say that Montreal has not provided us with some great battles tonight, but we do expect things are going to open up considerably when we head to Nürburgring in a week's time. But until then, it's goodbye from us. I have been Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, and if you have enjoyed, be sure to let us know. But until a week's time, it's goodbye for Next Gen Racing. Stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.